stealing is a big business. It's called statism. Every state in the world steals from people systematically through inflation and taxation. A lot of people today aren't having children because why? Children are expensive. Inflation's driving the cost of everything up.
Why do you think Bitcoin and its community give off this cultish vibe?
I mean, I'm probably doing it right now. The man who blames others has yet to begin his journey. The man who blames himself has started down the path. The man who blames no one has arrived.
And to borrow your very own question of what is money, here I'm asking you, what is time?
Oh yeah, thank you for that. Very hard question. First of all, it's just a mystery.
One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious.
I see central banking for me as that highest immorality in the world, something I want to educate people about. I want to make conscious. It's a very unconscious institution that's corrupting the world.
What's your experience confronting our shadow self without becoming consumed by them?
Great question.
Well, Robert, you've played a crucial role in my own journey of really getting orange pilled. It was even after I started working in Bitcoin, and it was your book club with Dr. Jordan Peterson, Gigi, Richard James, and John Ballas that really gave me a different perspective of how Bitcoin can be viewed from the perspective philosophy, culture, because I'm not a numbers person, I'm not a technical person, even though I've already come into the Bitcoin community, I kind of struggle to understand the impact and find a personal angle of how I can contribute to and how I can understand such a deep and complex technology. And through your conversation, it was the starting point of me understanding, oh, this is more than a technology. And what are the implications of this technology can mean way more for individuals, communities, or even humanity. And that was really my starting point of calling myself a Bitcoiner. So this is very meaningful for me to sit here, do the first ever in-person episode on Live with Bitcoin with you. With the person who played such a detrimental role orange pilling me. So I'm sure you hear this a lot from people all over, but today you're hearing a thank you from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm looking forward to this conversation.
I am too, and thank you. And that's very meaningful to me when I hear you say that, because, well, how that particular conversation came about is we did a book club on Jordan Peterson's book, Maps of Meaning. And then out of the blue, a few weeks later, he invites all of us onto his podcast to talk about the parallels between Bitcoin and Maps of Meaning. And, you do these conversations, you never know what ripple effects they're going to create. But when I do hear about one coming back around and it changing someone's life for the better, it makes all this work that we do worth it. And you forget, right? You forget when you're just sort of operating in a vacuum. Sure, you're talking to people on Zoom, but you're kind of just in your own little space doing the writing and the thinking, and even the podcastings are sort of one-on-one. But it's nice to see the actual impact on the world as it comes back to you. So thank you for sharing that.
Nice. And I'm now in the same boat. Now I'm a podcaster, basically doing the same mission, but still getting there, looking to find a different angle. And this is my gem. Like, I really love the subjectivity in Bitcoin. And at Live with Bitcoin, oftentimes we don't have Bitcoin as the subject. We have Bitcoin as the context. And now that we have Bitcoin as the foundation, what now? Now we have Bitcoin, and now we have to live a life with Bitcoin. How do we do that? And how do we do that well? So that's really a lot of the focus we are having at Live with Bitcoin. And today it's an honor to have you share your life with Bitcoin and how you've gained your insight throughout your journey before and after Bitcoin. And let's get started.
Let's do it. Yeah. I'm excited.
I hope I at least ask one hard question.
You definitely going to ask some hard questions. I had a peek at the list beforehand, and there are some very hard questions.
Okay, there we go. Can't wait. Let's start from the Bitcoin community, I guess. In my personal experience, introducing people into the Bitcoin community, one one criticism or one concern that I get a lot is the notion of, oh, Bitcoin is a cult.
Mhm.
And what's funny to me is that if you think about the word culture, the word
Yes,
culture starts with cult.
that's right.
And I looked it up, and it actually turns out these two words are from the same Latin word source.
Right.
And versus when the culture signifies civilization and shared value and ideas, and then the cult is more leaning towards devotion.
Mhm.
So the first question is, why do you think Bitcoin and its community give off this cultish vibe?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I agree. Every culture does begin as a cult. Um, yeah, why does we'll go to the word community, I guess, to start. And John Vervaeke, I like how he breaks this word down into common unity. So it's anywhere you have people assembling themselves, organizing themselves under a point of common unity, right? Which could be a religious deity, could be certain principles, right? Like we have life, liberty, and property in the West is something we often talk about. Could be technology, right? Could be Bitcoin, right? The social consensus that adheres the 21 million hard cap, and then all of the other principles that are embedded in Bitcoin, right? Like proof of work is a big one, right? That's what makes Bitcoin uncounterfeitable money. But proof of work is also really useful in your life, right? It's like anything you want is on the other side of work type of thing. Bitcoin is radically truthful, for instance, right? So it has it's the only man-made system or social institution that cannot propagate falsehood, right? It's the only language in which lies cannot be told. But somehow also inspires its adherents or those who study Bitcoin to become more honest with themselves, typically in terms of taking an inventory of their life, right? Like, oh, here's the good things in my life and here's the bad things. And although the story is different for everyone, most Bitcoiners tend to start marking off things in their life that are not good or are bad and try to increase the side of the list that's good, right? So it's um, there's a somehow people are inheriting the values, I guess, of Bitcoin into their own lives. It doesn't mean that you just buy Bitcoin and you magically start doing these things. I think the through line might actually be time preference, which is obviously a notion that's been widely discussed, popularized in Saifedean's book, The Bitcoin Standard. But when you get people considering the consequences of their actions in larger and larger spheres of time and space, you naturally become more considerate of others and considerate of the bigger picture. And so that seems to have almost an inescapably positive effect on your life, right? If you're considering the bigger picture in all of your actions, you're going to do better, right? In whatever pursuit it is, strategically, even morally, right? You would think about, oh, you might be hungry, but you don't want to just steal someone's sandwich because, well, if you just think about the short-term consequences, that might sound like a good idea. But if you consider that every act of theft sort of unravels the social fabric, right? If you're considering it from the bigger picture, well, then you're more likely to respect someone else's property. And so, and there's other things, like Bitcoin's radically transparent. And so I think a lot of Bitcoiners, when you talk to them, they tend to just be open books. Like they'll tell you, here's my journey, here's how it is, here's how I see it, here's who I was, here's who I am now. And so it's an open debate how that process is actually working. It's easy to look at Bitcoin and just say, oh, it's just a technology or it's just this neutral protocol. But I think a lot of people often forget that we are core operating components of the Bitcoin network. Like you could almost say, like, where's the line between biology and technology, right? It's almost like a biotechnology in a way, because if there were no humans, there would be no Bitcoin, right? And so there is a social component to the protocol, right? Obviously, there's the protocol layer. The miners are just sort of enforcing the rules, but the rule selection layer is social, right? It is human, basically. And so the individuals operating nodes and selecting the rules to be run, that is an inherently social, cultural phenomenon. And so Bitcoin is a culture. right? Unavoidably so, because you have people, the Bitcoin community, and these terms are a bit loose. It's like, who do you call, like, is it every holder of Bitcoin in the community? Is it only people that have professed Bitcoin, not shitcoin? Where do you draw the line? Who knows? But Bitcoin establishing a really strong point of common unity among people that we all agree fixed money supply is the ideal money supply, because that means there's basically no one that can dilute anyone else forever. So that all the productivity humans unlock through entrepreneurship and innovation, all the purchasing power that yields will accrue to savers, right? It's not going to get scalped or harvested by money printers or anyone else. It accrues to savers in a form that's really hard to steal and impossible to inflate. And that seems to be the point of common unity for Bitcoiners. Why does it throw off the cultish vibes? I mean, I'm probably doing it right now, right? It's such a major innovation that it sounds absolutely ridiculous to talk about to most people that haven't given it a look, right? The number 100 hours is thrown around, that you need to study Bitcoin for 100 hours before you start to see the light.
Or you just watched a book club conversation of
or watch the book club. But I'm sure that was just the beginning for you, right?
True. Yeah.
Totally. I mean, I hope that'd be cool if you just watched it and you're like, okay, I'm all in on Bitcoin. But typically people need, like, with Bitcoin a lot, 15, 20, 50, 100 touches, or, hearing it from different perspectives. And so, yeah, it's a very radical innovation. It's like the analogy of the 6 blind guys touching the elephant, right? Everyone's sort of describing it through their own lens. A lot of people have said Bitcoin is a mirror, it sort of means a lot of different things to different people, shows you things, you see different things in it depending on how you look at it. You see yourself differently in it. And so it's this very sophisticated monetary innovation, a digital disruption to perhaps gold itself, which has been the technological standard for 5,000 plus years. It's still the dominant monetary asset in the world today, right? This is what wars are fought over. And so there's a lot to consider. Like, it's far outside the Overton window, I think, for most people. Most people don't understand why gold, most people don't understand, well, what money is, much less why gold became money, or that gold still is a very valuable geopolitical asset. I mean, maybe people understand that, but they don't understand why. People often tend to think that the paper money is somehow backed by gold still, which is not the case. So suffice it to say, it's a very esoteric, kind of nerdy rabbit hole to go into and figure this whole thing out. But those that do it, we end up with all this new vernacular and jargon even, right? We're talking about the Lindy effect or time preference and these things that people don't know what we're talking about. And so you kind of create this out-group vibe, right? Yeah. Just like if we were vegans or CrossFitters and we're all like, what's your, what do they call it in CrossFit? AMRAP, as many reps as possible, something like that. They work out like people, well, my AMRAP 60 minutes. And, they just start rattling off this stuff. And if you're an outsider, you have no idea what this guy's talking about.
Right.
But, so I think that's it. Like, the world is actually made up of lots of cults. You said the difference was devotion.
Yeah.
Versus civilization.
Versus values, ideas. Culture is more signifying more of the cultivation of shared value and ideas. And cult implies an intense devotion.
Intense devotion. I guess the intense devotion comes with Bitcoin in the widely shared perspective that there is no alternative, right? There is no alternative to Bitcoin. There is no second best, as has been popularized in the Michael Saylor interview. It is a fundamentally unique discovery even. And this is why, I wrote that paper, The Number Zero on Bitcoin, years ago. I was struggling to find a parallel. Like, what is a similarly disruptive idea to Bitcoin, and what it's singular and irreplaceable, right, or undisruptible. And so I really think the number zero, actually, you studied the history of that, which is actually really interesting. It ultimately led to a lot of things, but mainly the invention of calculus. And calculus is used in every modern science without exception. There might be some exceptions, but basically all of them. So everything, we're sitting in this well-lit room with teleprompters and laptops and computer screens and cameras and mics. Like all of the design and construction of all of this stuff requires calculus.
True.
So yeah, why is there intense devotion to Bitcoin? Probably for that reason.
I think there's the love aspect to it as well. Once we, as Bitcoiners, understand what this is and what this can mean for on an individual level and for society, then we would want the people we love to understand this.
Sure.
Because we want to be in a better reality wisdom.
Yes.
And I guess in that better reality, Bitcoin would be more likely to exist than not.
Yes.
So the devotion in my view kind of already comes from love as well. Of others, of people we care about, and the community aspect.
Yeah.
So if you were, and what I find fascinating about Bitcoiner is that it's so complex, but somehow it unites people from very unique, very diverse backgrounds or very diverse views. And this is the community where you find vegans sit with carnivores and monarchists and sit together anarchists. And this is just something that you don't really see in other communities. And my hypothesis is that if these people have to sit on the same table and have a amicable conversation, agree on something, they must, on Bitcoin in this case, they must be agreeing on something that's more fundamental than what these lifestyles represents.
Yes.
So what do you think those values are? And if you have to boil down to 3 words, basically answer the question you were asking, what is your definition of a Bitcoiner? Like, what do you think are some of the commonalities of Bitcoiners? 3 most important traits, qualities.
3 words.
Or 3 things
Okay.
about.
Ooh, that was a good question. I think I beat this one to death, but if I was just going to give you 3 words, and I say it all the time, is life, liberty, and property. Like, this is all we need to do, right? Is respect one another's right to live.
Yeah.
Don't kill each other.
Yeah.
Don't incarcerate one another. Don't physically coerce one another, right? Respect one another's right to be free and move about freely in the world. And respect one another's justly acquired assets, right? Don't steal, basically. So I think that, and that's something we've had with us for a long time, right? That was when King John signed the Magna Carta in 1215, it was life, liberty, and inviolable property. It's an ideal we've had with us for a very long time. Which the Magna Carta preceded the U.S. Constitution. U.S. Constitution changed that to swapped out property for the pursuit of happiness, which I think is a mistake. But it is a set of ideas we've had with us for a long time, but the actual implementation has never been more perfect than Bitcoin, right? It's you brought up love, and it's like there's a deep question there too. It's like, I agree with you. We have an intense devotion to Bitcoin because we want those that we care about to get on the ship, right? To get on the ark before the world is flooded in hyperinflating fiat currencies, or as it's being flooded, however you want to say this. You want people to protect themselves. You want people to have freedom and hope for the future and securing the fruits of their labor and not being stolen from and not being deceived. Like, these are all things you would want for people that you care about. And these are things that Bitcoin affords people. But there's a deeper question too, and this is a big one in Bitcoin. It's like, how much of our individual path of character development, our morality, our way of being in the world, how much of that is influenced by economic incentives? It seems to me like, economics runs really deep too, right? Evolution itself is an economic process, right? Anything that allows an organism to do more with less tends to outcompete in the marketplace, so to speak, the Darwinian domain of natural selection, and become a feature of an organism. Same thing with capitalism, right? Just in a different domain, that the best tools, the most useful tools, tend to become successful in the market, and the less useful ideas or tools fail. So if Bitcoin is this, and with this interacting with this network, we're using this money that's really hard to steal from one another, how much does that change the patterns of relations we have with one another over time? Because right now, stealing is a big business, right? It's called statism. Every state in the world steals from people systematically through inflation and taxation. It's also small business, right? There's gangs and mafias and all of this that engage in organized crime. But a lot of that is dependent on the physicality of the things being stolen, right? So if someone has a briefcase full of cash or a safe full of gold, well, you don't need to negotiate with them. You just, incapacitate them and take their physical assets. But Bitcoin lets people hold purchasing power in a non-physical asset, and one that can be secured by a collaborative custody model, also called multi-key or multi-sig. So it makes the prospect of expropriating someone's purchasing power much less likely. So the question is, like, how much does that change the business model of statism and, organized crime and all of these things? So, I say all of that to say that Bitcoin gives us an incentive to make the word love is tricky here, but I'm not saying Bitcoin incentivizes us to love one another necessarily, but it does incentivize us not to coerce one another so often. And maybe that is a foundation on which we can build a more loving world. You could also take it a step further and say that because Bitcoin is making theft less profitable, which is one of the value propositions of Bitcoin, that it actually increases human productivity. Because, and this is intuitive, I think, to understand, anytime someone spends time taking from you, that's time that they did not spend producing something. So not only have they taken from you and disincentivized you from producing in the future because you didn't get to keep all the fruits of your labor, but they themselves also did not use that time to spend producing something. So you've disincentivized producers from producing, and you've reduced aggregate productivity because the person that did the expropriation could have been doing some production instead, basically. If we can make that whole process more difficult or less likely to occur, isn't that a world in which people would have more financial means? We'd be more productive. We'd have more purchasing power. We'd have a higher level of aggregate wealth, higher living standards. Isn't that a world where people would have more children? Isn't that a world where people, like a lot of people today aren't having children because why? Well, children are expensive. Inflation's driving the cost of everything up. There's this common complaint that millennials can't afford to buy homes, whereas, the generations before them could buy a home at this age. The financial component of actually building families is a really big one. And when you've systematically robbed everyone blind, like an entire generation blind, don't be surprised when they don't have a lot of kids. And if they don't have a lot of kids, there's less love in the world. There's going to be more love in the world, the more economic means we have to support a larger population. So again, not saying that Bitcoin is love or Bitcoin makes you love anyone, but all of these dynamics, I think, sort of feed into the idea that Bitcoin is conducive to a more loving world. And what are 3 words? Like, you don't need to love everyone in the world, but you should respect everyone. And I think those 3 words for me are just respect, life, liberty, and property. Sorry, that was kind of a meandering answer, but hopefully that was helpful. The farm at Okefenokee is a revolutionary new regenerative agricultural community. It features an 8,000 tree olive orchard, which they use to make their own olive oil, as well as a very large pecan orchard. All the animals on the farm are heritage animals, with some varieties over 100 years old and others thousands of years old. Fresh eggs are produced daily by the farm's chickens. Also, there are over 1,000 beehives that pollinate the over 200 heirloom fruits and vegetables and provide honey to all the residents. The farm makes its own molasses, unrefined sugar, herbs, and spices. The farm also features an herbal apothecary and a commercial kitchen. These are just a few reasons why the farm is the healthiest place on earth. To learn more about the healthiest place on earth, go to okefefarm.com and use discount code BREEDLOVE for $21,000 off custom cabin pricing. Again, to learn more about the farm at Okefenokee, go to okefefarm.com and be sure to tell them I sent you. Forget multivitamins and other supplements. Animal organs are the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. You can get 100 times more nutrients from organs than you can from muscle meats. But the problem with eating organs is that they are difficult to find in stores, they are difficult to prepare, and even when they are prepared well, they often don't taste great. Thankfully, Heart and Soil Supplements has made consuming organ meats so much easier by providing powderized organs in capsule form. Organ meats include everything your body needs to thrive: vitamins, minerals, peptides, proteins, and growth factors. This is why organ meats were the most prized foods for our ancestors. Fortunately for us, Heart and Soil makes these treasured foods easily accessible. So go to heartandsoil.co today and use discount code BREEDLOVE to get started on your journey to optimal health and vitality. Again, that's heartandsoil.co, discount code BREEDLOVE. Have you ever wanted to start a business in the Bitcoin space? If so, then the WiM Startup Accelerator could be for you. WiM is the first startup accelerator dedicated exclusively to businesses developing in the Bitcoin Lightning Network. 4 times each year, WiM brings teams from around the world to New York City to work with like-minded entrepreneurs, pushing the boundaries of what's possible with Bitcoin and Lightning. The program is designed to help early-stage companies achieve product-market fit, develop their brand, secure early-stage funding, and grow businesses that fuel the global adoption of Bitcoin. Go to wolfnyc.com to learn more or apply today. Again, that's Wolf, WOLFNYC.com.
Jimmy's song talks about rent-seeking, the rent-seeking mentality, and what I was gonna say, rent-seeking mentality. Do you
Getting something for nothing?
Yeah, getting something for nothing.
Yeah.
Do you consider yourself a hopeless romantic?
Hopeless romantic?
The reason why I asked this is because I almost feel like Bitcoiners, in order to become a Bitcoiner, you have to be at least a little bit romantic to even remotely grasp the idea and accept the idea that there can be something as good as Bitcoin. Because the promises of Bitcoin oftentimes to outsiders is too good to be true. And then some people just turn away from that because they're saying, oh, there's no free lunch, and how can it's impossible because it's too ideal. And it's almost like you need to be a little bit romantic to accept that there can be the ideal to be a Bitcoiner.
That's where I was going to go with it, actually. Like, when you say hopeless romantic, that brings up connotations for me of like someone that wears their heart on their sleeve and is like always chasing romantic love. And I don't think I'd put myself in that category, but I've definitely been accused of being an idealist for sure. But Bitcoin is in many ways an ideal made real, right? Like there was no possibility of creating a fixed supply asset of any kind whatsoever before Bitcoin. I don't think there's the possibility of ever creating a fixed supply asset after Bitcoin. Now there are umpteen million shitcoiners that will raise their hand and be like, no, my favorite shitcoin also has a fixed supply, blah, 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 or even a diminishing supply, but those assets are not decentralized. There's no credible assurance of the integrity of their supply or their diminishing supply, right? There is a group or an individual or a foundation, someone that controls the rules of that asset. So you can tell me, your favorite shitcoin has a fixed supply, but I don't buy it. Bitcoin has this like battle hardened path where it's been attacked, right? It was hard forked in 2017, and all of these attempts to actually break the supply cap of Bitcoin have failed, right? That it is a tried and true money that has apparently an actually unchangeable, immutable, fixed supply that no one knows how to cause it to deviate from that. Despite a lot of influential Bitcoiners attacking Bitcoin in 2017 during the block size wars. You could read the book, The Block Size Wars, for more on this. But not only were they influential, but they're also very well-financed companies and individuals trying to take control of the Bitcoin network and the nodes. It's a very complicated, interesting story, actually. It shows you that interface between the protocol layer and the social layer we talked about earlier. But ultimately, the social layer won. And the nodes won, basically. They chose out of their own individual self-interest what was right for them, and that is what Bitcoin continues to be to this day. So it isn't ideal. Like, isn't a money with 0% terminal inflation, again, 0%, right? Like, would you say that the number 0 is an ideal? Well, it's the center point of mathematics. I don't know that it's going anywhere. You can't really change it. It's an idea that completely transformed the world,
Of course.
made all modernity possible, and it paradoxically is the number that represents no number. It's like this crazy symbolic paradox. And I think Bitcoin is literally on par with that. We have this perfect money, basically, right?
Wow. So see, we're sounding cottage again.
Yeah, we sound cultish, but again, go do the deep dive on why I love this sequence of reasoning. Why did gold become money? Right?
Mm-hmm.
I think if you ask that question, you'll eventually arrive at, well, what are the properties of good money? What did people choose? And people narrow this list down differently. I was popular for saying it needs to be divisible, durable, recognizable, portable, and scarce. Gold was the best tool for that job for 5,000 plus years. Problem though, gold isn't too portable, right? So if we're going to have a globalized society transacting across oceans, well, you need that gold to move at the speed of light. We couldn't really do that with real physical gold, so we put a derivative layer on top of it called banknotes. And that's where all the corruption happened, right? Between the custodian of the gold and, trust me, bro, the gold is here, and the derivative layer, which is actually moving these banknotes around that are supposed to be pegged to gold. But if you don't settle frequently enough, then you just get corruption and systemic risk. Well, what is Bitcoin? Bitcoin is money that has perfected those properties of money. It can't be more divisible. It's divisible into 100 billion units called Satoshis today. You could, via soft fork, which is a backwards compatible software update, you can increase the divisibility on Bitcoin ad infinitum. So if it ever got to the point where, a cup of coffee was half a Satoshi, we could increase the divisibility. All right. So it's perfected divisibility. It's perfected durability. It's distributed code. The analogy I like here is the Bible. You could go on a Bible burning campaign to your heart's content, but you're never going to destroy the Bible, right? Because the Bible is an idea. It's like permeated the collective psyche. It's been written down and memorized even. It's all over the place, right? You're not getting rid of it. So for all intents and purposes, I would argue that the Bible as an idea has basically infinite durability. It's going to be with us till the end of time, or till the end of human time, at least. I would say Bitcoin's the same. It's just this distributed information. It's updated everywhere. Records are maintained everywhere. Obviously, it's a purely native digital asset, so you can move it at the speed of light. You're not getting much faster than that. It's very portable. Recognizability means the ability to authenticate the veracity of the money. So this is actually where we get the term sound money. Drop a gold coin from a certain height, makes a certain sound. That's a heuristic for the gold being pure. You could also assay the gold to get more precise verification of its authenticity. Bitcoin has perfected that too, right? Every node is always checking the entire network. You can audit the entire supply yourself. You don't trust, you verify, as they say. And then finally, scarcity, which is, maybe not the ideal word. We may want to go with the word integrity, right? Supply
Mm.
integrity. Bitcoin has definitely perfected that, in that it has a fixed supply, and there's no better money than that. So yes, I think Bitcoin is an ideal made real, but it's, yes, challenging for people to accept that because of the old phrase which you brought up. Sounds too good to be true.
Right,
But the
right.
thing about Bitcoin is that it is so true. It is the truest thing we have ever created. And in truth is goodness. So it's a lot to absorb. But I haven't heard any very compelling counter arguments.
So from a cultural standpoint, when you hear the argument of, oh, Bitcoin is a cult, without getting to the facts, do you think as Bitcoiners culturally, and if we're trying to bring more people onto the Bitcoin standard, is this something that we should embrace? Or is it something that diminish our vision? Or in other words, we talk about, and you talk about this a lot, of Bitcoin, being a Bitcoin maximalist is
Mm,
being a give tough love.
mm,
Um, and if when we give this tough love and the people who are on the receiving end are not receiving well to the point it actually becomes a turn off of Bitcoin,
mm.
is that on them or is that on us?
Hmm. I'm not very big on the idea of blame. As let's see if I can say this correctly. An old Chinese proverb says something like, "The man who blames others has yet to begin his journey. The man who blames himself has started down the path. The man who blames no one has arrived." So the world is very complex. We are rational beings, so we interact with one another through rationality and language, but we're also highly imitative, very hungry for social status and validation. And so we will do, I think this actually supersedes our rationality. It's like we'll do anything to get recognized or acknowledged or, considered to be at the top of whatever hierarchy we're playing in, often using rationality to create justifications to ourselves or others while we're doing the particular thing when the real motivation is just social status. So, is that outsiders' fault if they're seeing Bitcoiners interact and they're getting a vibe that they don't like and they are perhaps put off from Bitcoin? Um, it's a tough one to answer, right? Because ultimately, as individuals, I think we are largely responsible for ourselves, right? And I'm not trying to say that we're atomized and totally disconnected from one another. I actually really buy into the idea that, you become the average of the five people you spend the most time with. Because again, we are imitative, we are absorbing character traits from one another all the time. But if you understand that, you can take that process into your own hands, right? You can choose who you spend time with. You can choose what books you read. You can choose what content you ingest, et cetera, et cetera. So if someone's going to use that as an excuse and just say, oh, I saw a guy that was mean on Twitter one time and he had Bitcoin in his profile, so I think Bitcoin is terrible. I mean, if you want to take that path, that's fine. But I'll go back to the zero example one more time, right? You might encounter a really mean guy on Twitter that's using the Hindu Arabic numeral system to do his accounting. That doesn't mean the Hindu Arabic numeral system's not useful and going to outcompete every other numeral system in the world. The meanness of that guy actually has nothing to do with the utility of that system. So, learn to dissociate the thinker from the thought and the tool user from the tool and evaluate each on their own merits. But I don't take, I would never be like, oh, all of us Bitcoiners need to calm down and, turn down the rhetoric and make sure we're more warm and friendly. It's like, no, I believe in freedom. I personally don't want to go online and act like a dipshit, bully, whatever, which like a lot of Bitcoiners do. They're notoriously bad for this. I don't agree with that. That doesn't give me joy. I don't want to do that. But I'm not going to tell others they shouldn't do that. If they want to do that, go to town. I'm not here to. We're not here to make Bitcoin inviting necessarily. It's like we're just here to use the best tool. Yeah, use the best tool for our own purposes. And then if we want to also talk about why it's so good, well, then so be it. But you also don't have to say anything. You could just figure it out for yourself and use Bitcoin and go on about your business. I guess me being the idealist that I am, and the humanitarian, I actually do care. I find fulfillment, as I said earlier with you, when you get some value out of something that I've done, I get fulfillment from that. So in my heart of hearts, I want to try and move the human race forward. That's why I talk about this stuff.
Right.
And so but that's a me thing. I don't expect everyone to do that. Bitcoin does have this interesting thing that it sort of turns people into ambassadors for it, right? Like, and again, you're incentivized to do that, right? So I'm not going to try to play Mr. Moral Purity over here too. It's like, well, sure, I also have an economic incentive to educate people about the nature of Bitcoin. But you've aligned, this is why Bitcoin's so interesting. It aligns individual self-interest with the collective interest.
Yeah, totally.
And so you can simultaneously do something selfish and selfless. When you stack sats, you're improving your own well-being. You're stacking the hardest money there's ever been. But you're also you're taking energy out of the fiat currency complex. And you're devitalizing the biggest institution of organized crime in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can actually engage in both of these things simultaneously. And so it makes Bitcoin really interesting.
Yeah, it's so true, because if you think about it, how in fiat society, it's hard to do. Like if you create more money on top of whatever we have, everyone's going to get poorer.
Yes.
Versus in Bitcoin, the more Bitcoiner we have, the more people we bring onto the Bitcoin standard, because there's the fixed scarcity or the integrity that's built into the system. Everybody benefit from having more Bitcoiners. It really aligns the service to self and service to other, and it doesn't have to contradict. Exactly. And I love the point you brought up to basically we talk about this is sovereignty. Basically, you are in charge of your life. This is your responsibility, and you can find whatever excuses to look at something or not look at something, but ultimately we take charge of our own lives and we save ourselves.
No one's coming to save you, as they say.
Yeah.
And it can sound cruel, but I think the more quickly or more deeply you come to accept that truth, the more responsibility you take for yourself and your loved ones. And that actually leads to a better world. It's dealing with the world as it is, not as you wish it to be.
Of course, exactly. And what's also fascinating about that is because everybody should take their own responsibility, we should remind ourselves when in the process of trying to orange pill other people, when trying to introduce people about Bitcoin, is that they don't always get it. Not on the first try, sometimes not on the 100th try. And we shouldn't get frustrated and hot bothered ourselves in that process. We try our best, but we should not get attached to the outcome.
Yes.
And do you believe there's a karmic element to it? Do you believe that there are some people who are not meant to get Bitcoin?
Well, I don't know. When you say meant to, that sounds like
that's an air quote.
Preordained fate. And I love this quote from Carl Jung. I've been saying it left and right lately, so you may have heard me say it, but until you make the unconscious conscious, it will continue to direct your life and you will call it fate. So I think part of being human, or part of the adventure of being human, is really trying to learn about the unconscious patterns that govern our lives and make them conscious, so that we can then start to participate and actively guide ourselves, control our destiny, so to speak.
Right.
Whereas if these things are just purely unconscious, well, you just do them without understanding them. So a great example is like when someone gets triggered. When you're triggered, you go from the prefrontal cortex down into your reptilian brain. and you just start carrying out an unconscious pattern that you're programmed in, right? So you get triggered. This is why they say whatever triggers you controls you. Like once that happens, you can no longer control yourself and be rational. You're just going to have this behavior. And so learning to, I'm sorry, what was the original question? I got off track a little bit.
Meant to.
Meant to,
Karmically.
yes, karmically. Okay.
Not meant to get Bitcoin.
Yes. I don't believe that, right? I don't think that there's anyone that's fated to not get Bitcoin, because everyone has the opportunity to make the unconscious conscious, to learn more, right? You might have just spent your entire life chasing dollars and you don't know why, right? It's like just this unconscious thing. You might consciously, be designing your business or going to work, but you don't really know why you're chasing the dollars. Well, you can ask yourself, what is the dollar? What is money, right? You can make these things conscious and then change yourself. And I think it's easier to do when you're younger, harder to do as we age, but it's still possible. Like I know a lot of older people that have been thoroughly orange pilled, right? And they are diehard Bitcoiners. And they did that by going through that tunnel of inquiry. So I'm going to slightly change the question a little bit and say, no, I don't think there's anyone that's meant to not get it. But I do think there will be many people that will not get it. And this is, I forgot who said it, so I'm not going to try to attribute the quote, but quote that I really like on this: science advances from funeral to funeral, right? That a new idea comes into the minds of men, but old, especially if it's threatening to an older established order, which Bitcoin is threatening to a lot of the established order, it tends to be ideologically resisted. I could once again go back to the number zero. The number zero was ideologically resisted when it came into Europe. It was even outlawed at one point. But it didn't matter because the utility of the idea was so tremendous that it spread and won. So people can resist the idea, but the people that embrace the idea, if it has greater utility to that individual, well, then they are going to flourish more, right? They're going to acquire more resources. Their businesses are going to be more successful. They're probably going to have more children. They're going to, outcompete both economically and even biologically on average. I'm not saying everyone that makes money is going to have a bunch of kids, but, on balance, let's say. And then the people that resist the good idea are going to have the opposite outcome, right? They're going to become more diminished in terms of their wealth and their biology and their bloodline, et cetera. And so funeral to funeral, the good ideas get better and more powerful, and those that adhere to them get better and more powerful, and those that do not do the reverse. So I think that is the path Bitcoin will go. It is a selection process. And at some point, assuming that's correct, which you may or may not agree with, if Bitcoin succeeds by that process, maybe in the distant future, it'll become an unconscious thing again. People just like, yeah, you don't like stop and think about Bitcoin and do all this Bitcoin philosophy. And, there'd be no reason to educate people in the way we're doing today, right? I guess there would be, but what am I saying here? The need, right? Right now, people are in this scam we call the fiat currency complex. Well, in that distant future, people wouldn't be in that scam. They'd just be on a Bitcoin standard. And so, sure, we can teach you about it, but there's not going to be this painful impetus to causing people to want to learn about it. Maybe they're into AI or whatever the next thing is, and they're not even thinking about Bitcoin. Bitcoin could become very boring at some point, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And at that point, it could become an unconscious thing again. Like we all just, we don't think that much about electricity, right? We're not all like talking about electricity every day, how cool it is and how much it's changing the world. It's like, no, we just flip the switch and expect it to be there. I think Bitcoin is something that essential that could become similarly regarded.
That's how essentially how the hyper Bitcoinization can look like is when nobody thinks about Bitcoin again and live with it in every aspect of their life. And we were talking about, and you were talking about how Bitcoin aligns the selves to the service to self and service to others. So let's talk about greed, because Bitcoin is a thing where it's okay to be greedy, because when you're being greedy, you're also helping others along the way. But let's start with this. Is there such a thing as having enough Bitcoin?
So I want to talk about greed first, because this is a semantic point, but I think it's important, right? That what are the 7 deadly sins again? It's like gluttony, greed, sloth, wrath, lust, pride, envy. I
Yeah.
think those might be it. Well, so greed is one of the deadly sins. So I want to disambiguate greed from self-interest. Self-interest is wonderful, right? Like, why? You should absolutely be responsible for yourself, take care of yourself, pursue your own ends, build the most valuable business you can, enjoy life, have a family, like pursue your self-interest, do the things you want, live the life of your dreams. Everyone should be on that path. I want that for myself. I want that for everyone. Okay. But what you don't want is for anyone to pursue any of their ends at the expense of someone else. Right. So the line here in my mind, between self-interest and greed is consent. You could also call it private property if we want to go back to that term, but we'll stay with consent, right? Someone maybe, really wants a Lamborghini. Okay. If you work hard and save money and you build businesses that help other people and they engage in consensual exchange with you, and you're able to save money over time, and then you go to the Lamborghini dealer and you have another consensual trade, here's my whatever it is, $250,000, they give you the car. Great. All is well and good. But if you, out of your own desire for a Lamborghini, decide to go and steal that car instead, that is greed. That's where I think you're in the domain of sin. Sin, technically, you're unraveling the social fabric, right? If everyone acted that way, there would be no society, basically. Right. So you don't have to get theological or metaphysical about it. It's like, if you do these things, it's what is the rule? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you, and don't do unto others as you would not have them do unto you. The gold and silver rule, I think they call that. It's basically that, right? You wouldn't want someone to steal your Lamborghini, so don't steal the guy's Lamborghini, right? Yeah. And so that is very important, I think, because I don't think there's greed in saving money. That doesn't make you greedy. That makes you prudent. Self-interested, of course, but also prudent, right? You're planning for the future. You're giving yourself more options for future action. There's nothing morally unjust about that. Right. But if you accumulate options by stealing from someone else's, pool of options, that is bad, right? That's the line. Consent, private property, however you want to frame it. The second part was, can you have too much Bitcoin? What was it?
Wait, before we jump onto that, I want to ask a follow-up question. So now you're basically saying good to make the distinction between self-interest and greed. And if your definition of being greedy is to take what's not yours and take what's others, like the stealing aspect of it, then there's no such thing as greed in Bitcoin almost, because you're not taking from others. You're in this ecosystem, live and breathe together. But okay, so not morally, it's fine. But from a personal development standpoint, us living our life, can we have too much self-interest to the point that that's not productive? Hence the question: is there such a thing as having enough Bitcoin? Because we see what's going on in this world, and then people say, "Oh, I don't have enough Bitcoin. I can never have enough Bitcoin." And this is a common sentiment we see on Bitcoin Twitter among Bitcoiners. So, do you personally believe that we as individual Bitcoiners can have enough Bitcoin?
Well, my problem with the framing of the question is the we, because again, it's looking at one group of people as if they're a single, indivisible, categorical whole. Yeah. And that's not true.
Is there such a
We're
thing?
acting individuals, right?
Right.
So for you,
Yeah.
in your own opinion, for yourself,
Yeah.
there may be a number that is enough for you. You might decide, I get X Bitcoin and I'm satisfied.
Right. Yeah,
So it could
exactly.
be true for you
Mm-hmm.
that yes, there is a point that you can have enough Bitcoin, while it is at the same time untrue for me. I'm not actually saying this about me, but I could be the
Mm-hmm.
guy that's like, no, I can never have enough. I would actually maybe say I'm probably in that category actually. Like I want to be a net buyer forever. I intend to be a net buyer forever, and I intend to pass as much of it on as I can. Does that mean I won't use it at some point if there's something else? I love to see people building their dreams with Bitcoin. This is something that Jeff Meyer is doing at the farm at Okefenokee. He's a big Bitcoin bull. He's been stacking Bitcoin for a long time, but now he's using some of that Bitcoin to fund his dream. He's building this 1,000-acre community that's food, energy, water independent. Like, fuck yeah. You think I'm going to like shame that guy for selling Bitcoin? It's like, no, if you've got your dream, whatever it is, your dream boat, your dream car, your dream house, your dream business, like that's what money is for. Money is to give you the options to go and live your life freely and to the maximum. Right. I don't believe, people that say never sell your Bitcoin or, shame on you. It's like, what are you doing? It's contradicting individual freedom. What you may choose to do, save it forever, take it to the grave, whatever it may be. Great. That's good for you. But don't apply that to others. I mean, again, it's a little murky because I'm never going to, as a freedom maximalist, you're never going to shame someone for saying something, right? If you want to say these things to other people, like, go for it. But I'm just not going to agree with what you're saying.
Yeah.
Because ultimately it grounds out an individual freedom for me. So that's how I would look at that. But if you're asking me personally,
Mm-hmm.
I do think acquiring more and more Bitcoin throughout my life is something I will do.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's greedy at all. I think it actually, again, it serves your self-interest, but it also serves the collective interest to the extent you consider, the systematic violation of life, liberty, and property immoral and bad for the world. Bitcoin's literally you're taking savings, purchasing power out of that system and putting it into the system that can't be used to print new money to fund all that nonsense. Right. We just sent another $8 billion to, the US just sent another $8 billion to Ukraine and to Israel. Where do you think that purchasing power comes from? It's everyone that's saving in dollars. Everyone's groceries and gas and all their other bills are becoming more expensive because they're being taxed through inflation to fund mass murder campaigns overseas. Okay? If you take purchasing power out of that system and put it in Bitcoin, you're boycotting all that bullshit.
Mm.
So, yeah, I that's how I like to look at it. It's like you can, through Bitcoin, take care of yourself and take care of the world at the same time.
And I'm glad you brought up the point of spending Bitcoin to fund your dreams, because we see, and this is another thing that we see, and there's another branch out of the can you have enough Bitcoin, is that we see some people are really stacking. They're really stacking to the bone. They don't want share and they're proud of it. But at some point, how do we balance the stacking sats, living for the future and being low time preference as we are as Bitcoiners, versus living in the now, living the present, and do use your financial resources to go after the things in the present moment, because we are constantly making that decisions all the time, and we see Bitcoiners maybe forego a wedding, like they don't take this vacation for their kids, or they they make these life choices that they think, oh, I'm using that money to save in Bitcoin, and that's going to be good for me and for my family. Like, where do we draw the line as individuals? It's a subjective, individually. Yes.
Yeah, like I have nothing prescriptive to say for all individuals that they need to do this, or it's like, but honestly, sure, maybe are people that are stacking to the bone, like you said, that don't own shares, but I don't hang out with those people. Like, every Bitcoiner I know is doing pretty well. I've got shares, they've got shares. They typically have nice houses. They often have nice boats, cars, I don't see anyone like struggling.
Right.
Now, but if that was your choice, right? If you chose to live the absolute ascetic lifestyle and just spend nothing and just stack, like, well, okay, then that means you valued doing that more than you valued buying the chairs or the cars or the boats.
So it comes down to the value then.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but again, it's like, and look, there's nuance here and whatever. It's like, yeah, sure, if you're not taking care of your kids or not sending them on a field trip, it's like maybe if you're the guy's friend, like have a talk with him. Like, hey man, I think you've stacked enough. Like let little
Mhm.
Johnny go on the field trip, or whatever the thing is, but you're not doing something evil, right?
Right.
He's not, I mean, you might be stealing little Johnny's childhood a little bit, but you're not stealing from somebody. So, there's a like blurry lines here, but
Mhm.
there's nothing hard and fast and prescriptive I can say that individuals need to do this until this point and then that. It's like, no, everyone needs to figure it out for themselves and decide what's best for them.
Right.
But in general, like these people that are stacking and selling all their chairs, like I see these, anonymous people saying stupid shit like that on Twitter. I don't see any of it in real life ever. So maybe I just don't hang out with them, or maybe they just don't exist, or maybe they're just online jokers. I'm not sure.
Right. I guess my point of going with this is that sometimes we don't see better in the moment. Sometimes we see, oh, now I work hard and like my parents, they worked hard their whole
Yeah.
life and then they realize, okay, now I've retired and what now? And I
Yeah.
wish I did spend whatever time,
Sure.
however
Sure.
much to support things that
Yeah. I actually, I'm glad you brought that back up because I actually view it that way. It's, you're asking something like, how do we balance our low time preference focus on the distant future with being in the here and now? And I've actually found in my own life, and I see in the lives of others, that it actually serves that. Like the more security you have into the future, the lower your time preferences become, right? You can actually think, well, I can do something today and I don't need to see the profits on it for 30 years or 50 years or whatever it is, right? Like you're a very long time horizon or low time preference investor, for instance, that actually frees you up to be a lot more in the here and now. It's like, well,
thing.
I
Huh.
just wake up and like, I don't have to do anything today. I've got plenty of money that'll last me well into the future. What do I want to do today? That's an interesting question. Maybe I don't know yet. Hmm. Been thinking about reading this book on fishing. I don't whatever the activity, whatever that interests you, right? Could be anything. And you pick it up and you spend a few days reading the book because you don't need to be at a 9 to 5 because you've had a low time preference and you've invested for the future and you've secured your future financially at least. No one can secure themselves from everything. And you've given yourself the liberty and the bandwidth to let your mind explore. And maybe you stumble across something you find interesting and you go, oh, bam, this is a business. I really want to build this fishing boat and whatever the thing is. So I don't think there's a trade off necessarily. I actually think one serves the other.
Nice.
That the more we can have more certainty about the future. Look, the future is always uncertain and the end is always potentially near. But if you have purchasing power in an extremely strong form of private property, then you have this assurance that, no matter what happens, more or less, my loved ones are provided for. I am provided for. I don't need to work. I can, whatever that version for you is, gives you a lot more freedom to be in the here and now and thinking about your next move, even if it's, a move in the here and now, but you're considering the longer term implications of that.
Right. Well, that's a really good point. And what you're saying is that the when we have the security, financial security, we're actually become freer.
Yeah, of
And that
course.
even puts more pressure on taking responsibility in our own life
Yeah.
and deciding who we are,
Yeah.
knowing who we are, knowing who we want to be, and actually, and now finally we have the tool and the sound money to
Yes.
enable us to go there.
Yes.
And when we think about it, time, our lifetime, the time we get to save from not having to be in the survival mode,
Mhm.
in exchange for a roof, for
Mhm.
food, then that's where we really start to live.
And you become more human. because when you're not in survive, like it's a high anxiety state, like how living paycheck to paycheck, right? One financial thing happens in your life, and all of a sudden you are potentially, can't pay your rent or can't buy food or can't take care of your kids,
All
whatever
the
the thing is. Like
pressure. Yeah.
that's a very pressure. It's a pressure cooker of anxiety, right? It's very high time preference, and then you're also very much more likely to engage in barbaric behavior, right? When you get desperate, like, oh well, couldn't feed the kids, so I had to steal the whatever the thing was, and like that, the lowering of time preference unwinds all of that, right? It's reducing
Mm-hmm.
people's anxiety, it's giving them a firmer footing to just let their mind explore what it is they ultimately want. Now, I want to be careful here too, though, because it doesn't. The word freedom, this very tricky word. You know, having that much financial wherewithal to just be able to sit in a place and not work and do whatever you like might actually come at a great cost,
Oh
right?
yeah.
You may have spent years running a business and working 15-hour days and earning a bunch of gray hairs, like you there can be a great sacrifice that's necessary, or even being in a place that many billionaires that are very financially secure. Well, their days are packed. They're running small countries effectively. They got 2,000, 5,000, 10,000 people hierarchies underneath them. There is a big cost that comes with that. It's not like I kind of painted this picture of someone that just had a bunch of Bitcoin and was chilling. But most people tend to find the thing that they like to do when they're at that level, and they do it hard.
Mm.
And so I just wanted to balance that out, that it's not just
Of course.
you
And,
got,
and and even if you have all the time in the world, that's in a way that's where the real challenge comes from, because I guess as even postmodern individuals, like in this generation, people have a difficult time dealing with boredom,
mm-hmm,
have difficult time being alone. So that we have all these devices that we're hooked on and the
mm-hmm,
social media at our fingertip, and those peer pressure that we can it's so easily accessed on a voluntary basis. Like
mm-hmm.
we voluntarily go on these
Yeah,
platforms and receive peer pressure. So
yeah,
what if we're and then we fill our time with work. We fill our time with errands and things that we need to do in this world and think, oh, I'm busy, I'm doing something. But what if all of these logistic burdens are removed? Now you have all the time. Some people will freak out
mm-hmm,
because they don't know what to do with their time.
yeah,
That's gonna be another beast, and which is why I love to focus on the subjectivity
mm-hmm,
and the personal transformations through the lens of Bitcoin. Is how can we live a better life with Bitcoin? Now that we have Bitcoin, we
mm-hmm,
have that get out of the
yeah,
way. How can we level up from there, um, for our consciousness,
mm-hmm,
for our family, for better relationships, and for more freedom and be more
yes,
connected and loved?
yeah,
That's gonna be the next wave of important things Bitcoiners have to think about.
yes, yeah. No, it's well said. And this is the drum we're beating lately. BTC, be the change you wish to see in the world. Well, that is an act of free expression, right? Like maybe the two examples I just gave, right? Like a monk basically with a
Hmm.
ton of Bitcoin that's just sitting around doing nothing. Maybe that's freedom to him.
Yeah,
Like I want to sit around and do nothing all the time and just sit
be
on my stash.
content. Yeah.
But on the other end of the spectrum, maybe there's the hyper ambitious billionaire guy that's, wanting to just like push the world forward. Michael Saylor could for this. He wants to upgrade the world, no matter, it's like, well, that's freedom for him. He chose, this is his path. He wants to go down that and he wants to do this. Like, great. Also great for this guy that, he has the freedom to do that. So freedom can come in many different forms. It doesn't, there's not a template for it.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah,
Everyone has to decide for themselves, and
exactly.
that starts
Exactly.
from knowing ourselves
Yes.
and knowing what why we're here for,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. Creating yourself that everyone is their own personal masterpiece. Like you have to take artistic control, creative direction of your life and take it on the path that you see fit. And it's not, again, it's not purely rational. It's like you can just control this thing rationally. Has a lot to do with who you spend time with, has a lot to do with what culture you plug yourself into has a lot to do with how you take care of your body, how you take care of your spirit, how you take care of your family and those people around you. So I think everyone has to ultimately just find their own path.
Yeah, totally.
Do you want to give your kids a foundation of freedom and understanding of Bitcoin and a healthy skepticism of government? Then you should try Tuttle Twins. It's a cartoon about a grandma with a time-traveling wheelchair who takes her grandkids on hilarious adventures to learn about economics and freedom. Think the education of Magic School Bus meets the comedy of The Simpsons. With Tuttle Twins, your kids can learn about Bitcoin from Satoshi Nakamoto, civil disobedience from Harriet Tubman, natural rights from John Locke, and how to destroy the economy from Karl Marx. Today, Hollywood greenlights a lot of woke content or mindless garbage. Each episode of Tuttle Twins is parent-funded, parent-vetted, and only released when it's parent-approved. Because Tuttle Twins is fan-funded, it was the world's first kids show to teach about Bitcoin. That episode alone has been seen over 40 million times and was tweeted about by Michael Saylor. You can watch episodes of Tuttle Twins for free right now. And if you like what you see, you can use code BREEDLOVE for 10% off a subscription to the Angel Studios app and watch all of the episodes. So go to angel.com/breedlove to discover Tuttle Twins today. And remember to use code BREEDLOVE for 10% off. One of my highest health priorities is keeping my brain in top shape. To take care of my brain power, I do many things, such as striving to read, write, exercise, and meditate daily. One of the latest tools in my brain power toolkit is MindLab Pro. MindLab Pro is a nootropic supplement that is scientifically proven to enhance your brain power. When I take MindLab Pro, my mind feels like it has a better grip on the world, my thinking is more lucid, and the articulation of my speech is radically improved. MindLab Pro has been tested in rigorous, double-blind, placebo-controlled human trials and has been proven to enhance brain power for users in every age group. MindLab Pro is an advanced formulation of 11 nootropic ingredients and is backed by research from over 1,400 human trials conducted over the past 32 years. So if you're looking to enhance your brain power, MindLab Pro is an excellent solution. Go to mindlabpro.com/breedlove to start enhancing your brain power today. Again, that's mindlabpro.com/breedlove. Do you think you know who will win the presidential election or how many seats the Democrats or Republicans will win in the House or Senate? Well, there's finally a legal way to bet on the outcome of these elections via a platform called Kalshi. Kalshi is the first legal exchange where you can bet on any event, including but not limited to elections. Kalshi has markets on who will win the presidential election, who will control the House and Senate, who will win swing states, and more. Kalshi is already being used by hundreds of thousands of people and has facilitated over $1 billion worth of trades. Let's take an example. Right now, Trump and Kamala are trading about 50-50, meaning you can place a bet on either and you will double your money if they end up winning. That's pretty good, and Kalshi has hundreds of markets just like this for you to go and play in. So go to kalshi.com/breedlove today to start playing in this predictions market. The first 500 traders who deposit $50 will get a free $20 credit. Again, that's kalshi.com, kalshi.com/breedlove.
Time difference. We talk about now how we have sound money and then that frees up your time.
Mm-hmm.
Time preference is a topic frequently discussed among Bitcoiners, and many would agree that adapting a low time preference has been one of the most transformative principles.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree with that personally.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about time. I'm a fan of time. I think about time perhaps too much, so I would love to hear your thoughts on this topic. And Bitcoin's protocol is intrinsically linked to time.
Mm-hmm.
We have the block time and we have the timestamps, blocks, and the mining schedules.
Mm-hmm.
It all creates this, and it seemed to be a more linear and structured approach. Like philosophically, how do you perceive the concept of time? And to borrow your very own question of what is money, here I'm asking you, what is time?
Oh, yeah. Thank you for that. Very hard question. Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's just a mystery, I think is probably the only honest answer anyone can give you. I grew up initially. I read a lot growing up, but the first thing I was really into was astrophysics, and this is what really got me into reading at first because I was just as a kid. We spent a lot of time outdoors. I would see the starry sky, and I was like, "Wow, what the hell is that?" I just wanted to know, like, I just wanted to know, basically. So I started reading. I guess the first book I really read was when I was like 10 or 11. The book Hatchet, about a boy, like, he's in a plane crash and he's lost in the woods and he has to survive. It was like a summer reading book for school. And maybe not the first. This is like the first full book that I read on my own. And so after reading that, I was like, first of all, it was like hard. You're trying to like make yourself learn to like to read, and I was sort of resistant to it. But then after I like got in it and got to the end of the book and it was really good and I really enjoyed it, I was like, oh wow, I can like do this. And so, well, first thing I want to know about were the stars. So I started reading a lot about astrophysics. So, anyways, the framework there is that it's the Einsteinian vision, right, of relativity, that the fabric of reality is made of space and time, space time, as he calls it. It's one thing. And the curvature of this fabric is gravity. And gravity actually it dilates space and time. So, if you're traveling at high speed, that your clock actually runs, I hope I'm saying this the correct way. I think your clock runs slightly faster
Hmm.
than someone sitting relatively stationary. So if someone's sitting on the earth and then, it has to go extremely high speed, like almost approaching the speed of light, but you'll see time dilation occur. So that was like my original understanding of it, is that it is this fundamental essence of reality. Um, but more recently, I've been very influenced by Mises, who I was introduced to by Bitcoin, basically. Uh, I guess I could credit Saifedean more specifically. Like, the Bitcoin Standard got me into Austrian economics, and then I started reading all those authors. And Mises is really on another level. Like his book Human Action, but a lot of his other philosophical writings, he's just something else. And his axiomatic view of the world is that it's almost like the only true thing we can put into words is that man must act, which means that basically, when you break it down, man must purposefully choose means appropriate to the pursuit of valued ends. So everything that we do, basically, other than like reflexive behavior, he would say, right? So if the doctor taps your knee with a little hammer and your leg kicks out, that's not action because it's not
Hmm.
purposeful. It wasn't contemplated. It's just like a biologically hardwired reflex. Anything that's not a biologically hardwired reflex is action, right? We're these goal directed creatures. We're doing it even right now. This microphone is a means to the end of producing this podcast with you. This chair is a means to the end of resting in one place comfortably while I talk to you. Phone is a means to lots of ends, right? You can call people, you can text people, you can browse the internet, you can ask ChatGPT questions. It's like, it's really hard to think of anything that you do or touch throughout the day that's not a means to an end. And so this perspective on it gives me a whole new spin. And I don't, hmm. I've also been very intrigued by the idea of metaphor. And so I think this is just like an idea I'm wrestling with a little bit. And I've got an essay that I've written about it. Not just about this, but about this point comes up in the essay. It seems to me like, if I'm looking at the world through the lens of human action, the only thing we can say is that we all action occurs here and now, right? There is no future action. Like, we can have the idea of future action, but it's not here and now. Its action is this pre-intellectual cutting edge of reality. It's happening all the time. It just is. It is what is. Even like observation. Well, your eyes, I don't know where, like how deep it goes, but your eyes are a means to the end of looking, so we are, even observation itself, thinking is an action, like
Yes.
there's almost nothing we can say that's not an action, again, other than these hardwired reflexes. So if that's true, then we're always in the present. We're only in the present. And in the present, all there is this perceptual matrix called space, right? And is that real? Is it? I guess it's real. Like we perceive it. I don't know. It feels like there's space between us, but we're also interconnected, by sound waves and air and vibration. You have a energetic pattern. I have an energetic pattern. Like there's a lot of parts of us that we can't see, let's say, but space seems to be the matrix in which all of these events are occurring.
Mm-hmm.
But then I'm questioning, like, okay, well, where's time fit into this? And when I go back to metaphor, I think it's very interesting that we speak of time in terms of space. It's like an idea. So I'll read this little part here. I said, after all, space and time are quite often described individually in terms of the other. Space is the time or moment in which all perception occurs. Available only to the perception of the present moment, space is the reified matrix to which all objects are affixed. Space is the objective snapshot of the unfolding event we call reality. Time is the space or place in which conception occurs. Unlike space, time is imperceptible. It is only available to us in the conceptualized forms of past and future, since only the present can be perceived directly. So I think it's like the original idea or something like that. Like we are the animal that uses symbols and conceptions. And, Jordan Peterson talks about this. You may appreciate this in his old lecture series on the psychological significance of the Bible. One of my favorite episodes where he talks about Adam and Eve. And he describes that story as the discovery of time, actually, that we are the animal that discovered, we woke up and said, oh shit, there's not just the snake in front of me, but there's the snake nest, right? And then there's the snakes within me. And so like once we woke up to realize that we would always have to work, we'd always have to prepare for an uncertain future and push back the horizon of the future and prepare and protect ourselves against the ravages of nature. Like we conceptualized time. And that is the original idea. So it's like the original metaphor. It's like, that's why we say, things like your time is up. All right. Like, or this will be, up. That's a spatial metaphor. Or this will be over in 2 weeks. Or, there are 3 weeks between the party and the next party. Between, like, it's all, we talk about time in terms of space because space is the primary matrix of experience. But then we abstract that experience up into the concept of time. And then that's like where we get into the whole symbolic world that we participate in. Yeah. And so, and then you get to the Bitcoin thing. It's like, oh, well, Bitcoin is somehow this perfect representation of time. Like the most purely conceptualized version of it, right? That there's a great essay from like 2019. I think it's Proof of Work is a Decentralized Clock that describes this really well, but it's basically, it's a timekeeping process, right? The block time is its own independent version of time in a way. And so, yeah, I don't know. It gets very strange there because you're also, we've described things like the printing of money as systematic time theft because, well, what are people doing? They're trading their time for money. You go to work, you trade your time, you engage in something you don't necessarily want to do, but you do it, you render favors or you render production to the marketplace. You get these tokens back called money. You then take that money back into the marketplace and you can use it to redeem production services from other people, right? You can buy shoes, you can buy the car, you can buy dinner, whatever it is. So we're trading time through money. Obviously, this is deep in our phrases, right? Time is money. We say it all. And Bitcoin is somehow like this perfect clock, but it's also this perfect money. And it's also this, unstoppable idea if we're going to look at it through the number zero lens. So it's like time is the original idea. It's somehow deeply connected to money, and it's metaphorized in terms of space. And, I don't know, it gets very mysterious for me there, but maybe that's why Bitcoin is so fundamental, that it's like the highest resolution depiction of the idea of time we have ever created. Something like that,
Kind of embedded in a very base layer, very fundamental layer of reality.
Yes.
And I love how you make the distinction of how how time can be a concept, time can be a construct even, and then how we have it's now,
Yes.
and then past. It's the time because I think about this a lot, and how I think about it is that our life is just a series of now.
Yes.
There's no past, there's no future.
Right.
There's only now, where you make gazillion of big or small decisions, and that's it. And personally, I've approached time in a way, like I still refer to past, present, and future, but how I've trained myself to live in a way that I want to be someone who lives the past, present, and future at the same time. And how does one do that? Is being present is fairly straightforward. You're engaged, you're in the moment, you're not distracted, you're very focused. But living from a past perspective is every passing moment I deep down subconsciously I remind myself who I was 5 years ago, who I was 10 years ago, and how the me right now is the future her. That I am the future of her, of that past person. And then at any given moment, from a future's perspective, it's almost like I'm standing in the future. I'm standing in the right now into the future. And I look back to this very moment as if I'm living in my memory while I still have the opportunity to change it and act on it. So that the point in the future, when I look back on this, the future me, which is the future present me, will appreciate this me. So I try to live off my own past self spirit, and I try to make it as easy and as pleasant, as positive as possible for the future me, while knowing that I have is just now. So that's like my approach to this.
That's beautiful. There's so many things. One of the things that jumped to mind at the end there was that Simpsons episode where Homer is like, I think he drinks a jar of mayonnaise and vodka, and Marge is like, honey, why are you doing that? And he's like, oh, that's a problem for future Homer. It's like, when I say it's the original idea, it's like, well, when you strip out that idea, you get dumb Homer, right? It's like literally the guy that has no conception of time. He's just, we would say he's basically being an animal, right? He's not thinking. He's not taking care of himself, right? But the more, again, back to time preference, like the broader you can consider your actions in the span of time, both historically and what you're trying to do in the future, right? If you're historically in the sense that you've studied the lessons of history, you've learned through the lives of others, the accounts of others, and you've incorporated that into your present action. And then the future, that you can do things that don't create immediate results, right? You can invest for the future. The longer you can invest, actually, the higher the returns tend to be, right? You build a company that lasts 100 years or 500 years, well, that thing is going to yield you a lot more economic value than something that lasts 5 years. And so it's very essential to being human, and that how adequately we grapple with and use the concept of time is almost what makes us human in a way.
So how would you say your view on time and how much time you spend on thinking about time? How was did that help you? Like, did it help you? Did it make it over? Did it complicate things, or did it help you? And with your understanding of time or your approach to understand time, what are the principles, or in your daily life, like how does it guide you to make your decisions?
Yeah. Well, uh, and a lot of this is, you don't, it's hard to know. It's like, is this part of growing up? Is this part of becoming a parent? Is this part of becoming a Bitcoiner? How, as things change for you, you don't actually, or I don't feel like I know exactly where to attribute all of the changes, right? Because a
Right,
lot of
of
things are
course.
happening in your life. But where I am today is that I really like what I do, actually. So I try to get up really early, typically. I'm not perfect at this. It's actually sometimes difficult for me to fall asleep at night, usually 1 or 2 days a month. And so that can throw me off. It's hard for me to stay. I know some guys that get up at 4 a.m. every single day, right? That's not exactly me. I try to get up early several days a week, but then a couple of days I'm kind of off kilter. I've found that just helps me be more productive. I can just flat out get more done when I'm up early. Um, I also really am interested in leveraging technological solutions to problems. Like instead of for as a recent example, ChatGPT has completely blown my mind how many things it can do, and it helps me write, helps me. I've been working on this online course stuff, like it helps streamlines that entire process. You find yourself like with almost any question that comes up, you just want to ask ChatGPT, and so um, I've gained a real deep appreciation for using tech as leverage to solve problems better, faster, cheaper, basically. Which I guess is another way of saying wanting to be productive. Um, and so, yeah, and then doing, also all that's well and good. I love what I do. I like to be productive. That's great. But then you also have to remember to take time to enjoy life. Like life is not, and I'm not saying I don't enjoy the work, but you also need to have like downtime, basically.
Yeah.
And may sound like it's not productive or a waste of time or whatever, but actually downtime is when some of my best ideas come to me. Or when you're just, socializing with friends or socializing with people, sometimes I get really good guest recommendations, or that's when all the serendipity happens. So you have to have time for that too. And don't treat it as something like a waste, or, don't be so ambitious that every day is a working day, and like embrace the downtime, really, relish in it. It feels good. It is good. And then oftentimes, makes you more productive in the long run somehow, like
Yeah.
new opportunities and things come from it. So,
Totally. I'm glad you brought this up because a lot of people, well, at least I speak for myself, right? Sometimes I feel like I cannot stop. I don't feel, and I'm already way better than most people because it's only now, right?
mhm,
I guess when we start to develop a relationship with time, or when we start to think about time in a more deeper way, we become more protective of
mhm,
our time. We
mhm,
become more intentional with who we spend time with, what we spend time on.
mhm,
It goes back to what you always talk about, the meaning,
mhm.
and because you're like you love what you do, and that's meaning. What you
Yeah,
love, that's meaning, and then you are protective of your time, and but at the same time you're spontaneous for new experience
yeah,
because you have this relationship with time that you know how this works. And modern people, sometimes we are unable to stop. So I'm glad you brought this up
mm,
to say that downtime sometimes is first very necessary,
yeah,
and we want
absolutely.
to have some, like, we work so hard, we want to have some fun, there's
Yes.
nothing wrong with it, and we
Yeah.
want to relax and share these moments with people we love, with ourselves,
Mhm,
for, I guess, more consciousness, more good times, and
mhm.
just more meaning
Yeah.
in general. So they're all intertwined together. which makes it one of the most fascinating topics.
Yeah, and makes you more productive too. Like you might think taking that whole day a week off is time you could have spent producing, but the day of rest, it's again the Sabbath, whatever you like, something about, and maybe it doesn't have to be one day a week. I don't know what
Yeah.
your frequency is, but figure it out, because just white knuckling and working 7 days a week is not it. Everyone needs some downtime,
Right,
and it
right.
will make you, prevents burnout, for instance. Talk
Yeah,
about something that's
totally.
counterproductive. It's like if you ever hit that wall, you're just done for months.
Yeah,
And so you need to constantly have these little recharge sessions.
right.
And that actually makes you more productive, even though it seems like you'd be
Yes.
less productive.
Someone needs this pet message. Whoever's listening, someone needs this message. We're talking about you.
Yeah.
Take it as a sign to
That's
like
right.
take a break,
Yeah,
right?
take a
Yeah,
break.
take a break. Well, turning the table around, do you think our perception of reality influences time? So now we're talking about how we think about time and how our understanding of time shape our approach to reality. So do you think reality and time, turning the table around, is that a
Yeah.
two-way street? Where
All right, I'll read another little blurb here. This is all just draft essay, so sorry if it's not fully baked. But yeah, so if time is an idea, then that also lends credence to the entire notion that time, well, what? Time flies when you're having fun, or time stood still when you had that moment with your loved one, or whatever it may be, right? That our conception of time actually does flow and can stay still and can fly, because guess what? It's an idea, right? Like we are almost like the process of being a human actor is generating time, right?
yeah.
And this is interesting too, actually, because Mises said that time is almost presupposed in the concept of action, because to act is to intervene in the flow of events and change their direction, right? So it's, I have some felt uneasiness, I have a problem, and I want to do a thing and have less felt uneasiness at the end, right? That notion itself presupposes a flow of events, right? A flow of time that the actor can actually intercede and change the direction of. So like, it's hard to put it to words, but it's like maybe time is that experience of being a human engaged in action, basically. Whereas again, if we look at Homer, that, obviously he's just a cartoon character, but the guy drinking mayonnaise and vodka and saying that's a problem for future Homer, it's like he's not he's not pursuing means and ends, right? He's like literally just destroying himself and thinking that future Homer is some other guy that's going to have to deal with it, not understanding that there's one continuous flow of events between mayonnaise, vodka drinking current Homer and dead future Homer, right? Whereas a normal human actor perceives it as such, right? That what I do today, the books I read today, the exercise I do today, the relationships I cultivate today influence my life in the future, right? They change who I am in the future. So almost like the very relationality between means and ends constitutes our experience of time, maybe, so I'll read this. I said, our experience of space is immutable, which is why the journey of 1,000 miles will always remain 1,000 miles, as surely as it must begin with a single step. On the other hand, our experience of time is immutable, which is why time flies when you're having fun, and when reflecting on certain sentimental or sublime moments in our lives, like a first kiss, we may say truthfully that time stood still. So maybe that means that this gets more into the metaphor stuff, but space-time is the emergent perceptual metaphor of an active human consciousness, and it is thus the arena for all human action. Space-time is thus essential to all human action, the universal means to all human ends. No ends can be pursued without using space and time as means, so all actions involve the use of space-time. Action can only be understood in terms of space and time, which makes space-time the most essential metaphor for human action. So, yeah, I don't know, I could go on, but basically it's like Yeah, something like space is the primary experience in the here and now, always, right? We can't imagine anything that's not in space. What does that even mean, right? It's like, it's as fundamental of anything as that I can think of. Like it's perceptually fundamental. It doesn't change. I mean, now again, Einstein says we have gravitational waves and you have the curvature of space and time. Like, you know, it gets above my pay grade at that point. But time definitely changes, right? Like I remember I was hit by a car in 2010, maybe, and I'll never forget getting T-boned, and my car was T-boned like this, and my car flipped over. I was in the driver's seat, obviously I was driving. I was the only one in the car. And I'll never forget that was like burned in my memory that time, like as soon as that car hit me, it was like
Slow
boom, it
down,
was,
hey?
ooh. I was like in the Matrix, and like I'd see all the glass shards. My mind's going quick. My mind's like, oh man, this is gonna be expensive. I hope this doesn't hurt, But it's like I'm literally in absolute slow motion. And then eventually like kind of and then kind of comes back to normal. Like, how did that happen? I mean, you could say, okay, well, your adrenaline was pumping. Okay, well, that makes sense. If I'm the one generating time and my adrenaline's pumping, maybe that's why the flow of time slowed to a crawl, And maybe we're hardwired for that, when something traumatic is happening, time slows down so you can act more effectively to deal with whatever's going on. So, anyways, it's very like way off the philosophical deep end, but
Last question on time,
yeah.
because you love so much on metaphor, and I just came up with this, so it might not be a articulated question enough. Thinking metaphorically, do you think time for you is more like a medium or more like a canvas?
Is a canvas not a medium?
Canvas is the using like art, for example. If you're painting, the canvas is the canvas, right? And then the medium is oil painting,
I see.
Acrylic or watercolor. Is it more of a medium for you or more of a canvas?
Ooh, I guess I was sort of envisioning space as the canvas, right? That is like the matrix in which all events and phenomena occur. You realize everything's an event, by the way, even objects as we typically consider them. Like, well, look at that object in 100,000 years, it will have disintegrated, right? There was an event. It is an event, basically. So I was considering space to be this canvas or matrix. And the medium, I guess, is the action, the actor, right? That we're actually moving through space, observing space, and then
the actor is the same. The actor is the painter.
Okay.
So you have canvas, which is the
medium. That's a good question.
What to be filled, and then you have the medium. Let's say you're painting and you're using oil, and the oil is something that you put on canvas.
Yeah, I think, well, as I said here for time, I said this about space and time, but time, saying here, you can't have means ends relationships without presupposing time. All right, so it's like is it a medium? Yeah, I guess it's mediating between means and ends. The mediation between means and ends as an actor is the experience of time. So when you experience time, maybe this is connected to consciousness, even as human consciousness, as we understand it, is it when you are interlinking your means end structure, the emergent property of that, of felt experience, is time, basically.
Or let's say when we're trying to paint an idea onto the canvas, do you think time is the thing that holds the idea, or time is the thing that?
I think time is the idea. Is the idea, the original idea. That's what I'm saying. It's like, I don't think animals have this notion of time that we have, but not in, they don't. There's obviously some proto action even in animals, right? Because squirrels bury nuts and beavers build dams, and they do things that plan for the future. Right. But we just do it to a much more sophisticated extent, or we're doing it, making a very significant use of symbol, right? And we're passing knowledge forward in time to one another. We're passing cultural programming to one another forward in time through ritual and imitation. So it's like, and you could think of ritual as like an embodied symbol, basically, right? When you see people doing this certain motion, and it's like, well, what are they doing? They're doing very precise movements that have been ritualized and done that same way over time. So, yeah, I think time, in my view, is this primordial idea, basically.
Very fundamental then.
Yeah.
There's
Well,
all there is.
if
The
you're a
now.
human and you're going to take action, you have means and ends, then you have time, basically. Before starting the What is Money show, I spent most of my career as a CFO, overseeing internal technology implementations and business acquisitions. Over the next 10 years, it is projected that over 12 million businesses in the US will be sold. If you are an operator running a business generating between $5 and $200 million of revenue, and you're considering selling your business within the next decade, then there is a significant opportunity for you to deploy technology to streamline business processes, reduce operating costs, and enhance the multiple your business ultimately sells for. To this end, I am partnering with the team at Emerge Dynamics, a firm with decades of experience in maximizing the value of privately held small and middle market businesses. Go to emergedynamics.com/breedlove to learn how you can build an attractive, high multiple company that maximizes your return when you fully exit. Again, that's emergedynamics.com/breedlove. This December 17th to 21st, 2024, join me on the Pacific coast of Mexico for our men's retreat, The Art of Alpha. At this world-class retreat center, we will have daily meditations, movement practices, yoga, cold plunging, infrared sauna, and many other biohacking modalities, all while enjoying world-class cuisine designed for optimal full-body health. The retreat center is a gorgeous biohacker's paradise located right on the ocean. You can think of this place as a nervous system reset facility. At the Art of Alpha, we are seeking men who wish to cultivate freedom, wisdom, sovereignty, physical fitness, truth, and love in themselves and in those who look up to them. If you've always felt motivated to push yourself to new limits to discover the best version of yourself, but you've struggled to find the right community to immerse yourself in, then the Art of Alpha is for you. To apply to join the Art of Alpha, go to breedloveevents.com. Again, that's breedloveevents.com to apply to join us for the Art of Alpha on the Pacific coast of Mexico this December 17th through 21st, 2024.
So let's talk about balancing duality. And as we navigate through the complexity of existence, and one figure, especially in the Bitcoin community, that often gets quoted is Carl Jung. And you just literally did it. He might be, I feel like he's probably Bitcoiners' favorite philosopher, left, right, and center. I get him.
That's a good question. No one's ever asked that one.
He's quoted. No, I this is my sense, because from the podcast I hear in the space, he gets quoted left, right, and center.
Interesting.
So here I have a quote of him too. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious.
Right.
So this
that
perspective
resonates with the earlier quote that I shared a lot.
Right. Yeah. So this perspective might seem counterintuitive at first, but it actually highlights the importance of duality in our life. So first, do you agree with his view?
Well, I think it, to me, it conceptually rhymes with the one that I said earlier. So yes, I do agree. And it calls to mind another Carl Jung quote, which also highlights or emphasizes duality. Instead of for a tree's branches to reach to heaven, its roots must reach down into hell. Something like that. I'm paraphrasing, but yeah, he's interesting. I didn't realize he had so many thoughts that were talking about duality.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And to if we need to exercise or access the dark side to gain more light, how can individuals even do that? Because exploring our dark side can be daunting. And how can we even, or personally, what's your experience confronting our shadow self without becoming consumed by them?
That's a great question. Um, yeah. So where to begin with this? And I mean, I've had even recently had an experience where I didn't even know it at the time, but I was engaging with some people I had just met, and I started to develop a judgment about them. And I really thought I was right. It was a negative judgment. I was like, oh, I'm pretty sure these are and very confident in my judgment at the time. Like, this is right. I'm not, anyways, basically had this established judgment in my mind about these people. These people are not good.
Hmm.
All right. Leave 3 days later. I start to realize that I start to see the holes in my own reasoning and judgment. And so eventually it comes back around. It's like, oh no, that was like completely me. I was like projecting my own shadow onto these people or something like that. And so that was recent. That was even just a few months ago. And so I don't know that the process of confronting your shadow ever stops. Um, it's maybe part of, we're dealing with a reality, and I'm not an expert in this at all. So, please, anyone, I'm not a Jungian shadow worker or any of that stuff. But maybe the very process by which we're dealing with knowledge and like we're trying to build models of reality.
Hmm.
Was the old saying, right? The map is not the territory. Our maps are always going to be blind to certain features of the territory that we are mapping. And that, and like in a literal sense, that's kind of what a shadow is, right? It's a blind spot. It's a dark spot that you can't see. You're not something you're unconscious of, and that, you know, dealing with knowledge basically is going to always come with these blind spots or shadows, and that's also even about your self-awareness, right? So you're and understanding yourself, your proclivities for being mean or bad or having rough edges, whatever it may be.
Hmm.
And so what can we do with that? Hmm
How can you,
integrate the shadow, is that?
yeah, like access it and try to understand it, but not consumed by it?
Yeah,
Or sometimes we get a taste of something that initially help us, but then we overdo
yeah,
it and go down a darker path, right?
yeah.
And get
I
deviated.
Yeah, I guess, and I know Carl Jung wrote a lot about Christianity and Christ, but um, when I was lost in my own darkness, I think it's because I was without a moral exemplar or role model. And for me, that's been Christ, basically. So trying to really heed the teachings of that man and try to respond to people with the compassion that that man responded to people with. Um, and that's a whole rabbit hole too. It's like it's taken me into the Rene Girard rabbit hole of mimetic desire, which he says, the revelation of Christ is that he made the unconscious process of imitation conscious to us. Like it was the first time a mythological narrative had been told from the perspective of the victim rather than
Hmm.
from the perspective of the mob. And when it was told from the perspective of the mob, the murder of the victim was always justified
Right.
because the mob needed to kill this victim to restore peace and order to the world. Whereas Christianity was an inversion of that mythological narrative. It told the same story, but from the perspective of the innocent victim. And so that Christ actually revealed that it wasn't the victim that was causing this mimetic contagion, but it was the process of mimetic rivalry itself. And so that's a whole nother kind of thing. But like studying Christ got me into that, which is something else that's very fundamental, I think, about understanding human nature, is that we are more imitative and jealous and status seeking than anything else. We're not, I mean, we're rational, sure, but like that rationality takes a back seat to all that other stuff, right? We're very hierarchical, very oriented toward the pursuit of power, right? But Christ gives you this sort of balancing act. It's like I guess you're going to confront your shadow just through living in the world.
Mm.
But if you don't have some kind of anchoring in a Christ or a Buddha or whatever your flavor is, maybe doesn't have to be a mythological character. It could possibly be a role model that's living and breathing. Could be your parents, could be some standard bearer, basically. If you don't have that, then I think the shadow interactions that come up for you in life will just get you further adrift, basically. You'll kind of pursue the pleasures and avoid the pains, and just become a darker soul overall. But if you have this, again, an exemplar, right? Someone to imitate, someone to come back to, someone to call, you can hold yourself to account and be like, oh, I did this, but what would Jesus do? People used to wear these bracelets in the 90s, right? WWJD. It's asking yourself that question. What would Jesus do in this situation? Like, that's a very useful question, actually. And it will call you on your own shit. And so, the people get very wrapped up in this. They're like, oh, what do you mean? Jesus is a fairy tale. And it's like, actually, like, it doesn't matter in my opinion. It doesn't matter if he ever lived. It doesn't matter if he rose from the dead. It doesn't matter if he was the son of God. It's just the story. It's just a story by which you can frame your life against and learn, am I on the path? Am I off the path? And, countless people, Carl Jung included, when you try to accord your life more with this story and walk in the light, so to speak, your life will get better. He said something else too, that something like Carl Jung said, setting your moral aim as high as you could possibly make it and just working your ass off to like achieve it was an adequate substitute to psychotherapy. Like, you didn't need to go see the shrink once a week and talk about all your stuff for 30 years. You could just go into your heart and find the most immoral thing in the world that you could do something about, and go do something about it, and like walk in those footsteps truthfully in the light, and your life would start to reorganize itself in a positive way around that. And that to me is like, well, what did Christ do? Was one time he had righteous indignation and physical manifestation of anger. Well, he flipped the tables of the money changers. Right? He flipped the tables of the people that were manipulating the weights and measures that everyone else used to conduct commerce. And so I think that's very telling, right? So maybe this is just my own interpretation of it, but it's like, I see central banking for me as that highest immorality in the world. It's something I want to educate people about. I want to make conscious. It's a very unconscious institution that's corrupting the world, right? Like, it's infected the world with a blood disease. If you consider money to be like the blood of the macroeconomic organism that is the global economy, well, there's a disease built into the blood. Everyone that's holding the money is getting stolen from, and then the stolen money is being used to fund warfare, and it's being used to fund fake news and propaganda. Like, it's corrupting everything that it touches, and it's the circulatory system itself that touches everything. So, I found that just to be useful, right? It's like, I also go to therapy. I talk to a few different therapists. I get a lot of value out of that, but having this really high moral aim of like to do something about gives me a lot of purpose, gives me a lot of organization in my life. And then when I do inevitably drift off the path, it's like I can hold myself to account and be like, well, what did I do in that situation, and what could I have done differently? And thinking through the eyes, trying to put yourself in that position. What would Jesus do about this? Just the exercise itself has been very useful. So
it's very grounding.
Yeah, and I say this as a non-religious guy, by the way. Like, I mean, I don't know, your definition of religious, like, is another definitional thing, but
Yeah.
I'm not a Bible thumper. I don't go to church. I don't even identify as a Christian necessarily.
Mm.
Like, a lot of people have identified me that way, but I don't identify that way. I would say that I'm like a disciple of Christ, like basically trying to discipline myself um, in the way this man lived. And it's not just Christ, by the way. There's also Socrates. That's a whole nother domain. It's less
Yeah.
human compassion and action. It's more rationality and thinking, and how he's always asking really good questions and challenging people, and just a brilliant argumentative person. Basically, it's like I want to think like him and argue like him and ask good questions like him. But then in life, I want to live from my heart. You know, I love this quote from Robert Grant, actually, because it's not, you probably heard the old quote that the mind makes an excellent servant, but a terrible master,
Mm.
which is also true of money, interestingly. Money's an excellent servant, but a terrible master.
Yes.
So the mind is a great tool, but don't become its tool, basically, right? This is the excellent master, right? Your
Yeah,
heart, the heart, but they must be in harmony, actually. So the quote I heard from Robert Grant that I loved: when you learn to feel with the mind and think with the heart, the river of wisdom flows. And so to have heart-mind resonance, that seems to be like a key to approaching life intelligently and effectively. And for me, it's like Christ, Socrates. And I'm open to others, but those are just the two I've found so far.
Interesting. It's almost like in order to not get lost in the way of finding yourself, in which journey there's gonna be some darkness. You are gonna encounter some darkness and
Sure.
your
And
shadow
others
self.
and you. Yeah, of course.
And the way to not get deviated from that is to have something that's so grounding that you can always return to and know why are you doing this. You come back to the why.
Yeah.
And the grounding energy is important because we think about, if you're in a spinning wheel and then you want to spin with it, you want to be in the flow too.
Yes.
And spin with it, you have to hold on to something, otherwise you're just gonna get thrown all
That's
over
right.
and get all
Yeah.
bruisey, and you won't get to what you are here for.
Yes. Yeah, you need a point of stasis to hold on to.
Right? And it doesn't have to be
Yeah.
religion, or it doesn't have to be anything. You can pick your own thing, and like you said,
Yeah.
you're using his teaching instead of claiming to be religious, right?
That's right. Yeah. And again, like I'm not exclusively either. Like I've also read a lot about Buddha and watched documentaries about him. So like I think there's a lot of value there too. And it doesn't
Right.
have to be either or. It doesn't have to be, you know, you're only a Christian or you're only Buddhist, you know, or what. It's like you can learn from all of these traditions and incorporate these lessons into your life and then use them as you see fit. Again, it's back to freedom for me. It's like I'm not here to prescribe any of this to anyone.
Yeah.
I'm just saying things that have worked for me, and you
Right.
can figure out your own version of that if you so please.
Exactly. And you were talking about how to ask yourself question, what have Jesus done in this case? And that's almost like you're disassociating yourself with the problem, and you're trying to elevate yourself
Yeah.
with a higher vantage point to look at the problems and say, if I know better, what I would
Yes.
have done. But as individuals, sometimes, at least for me, I would have the confession that I'm not able to do what I know better 100% of the time. Like sometimes there's so many situations where I definitely know better. I definitely know that I should be taking care of myself better. I should eat healthier. I should go to bed earlier and get up earlier so I'd be more productive. Everyone has these things where I know I shouldn't be doing this, or I know I should be doing this.
Yeah.
But we cannot bring ourselves to it. Where is the disalignment in your view? Like, do you have something like this?
Well, yeah, of course. I think everyone's life is, in a way, an endless series of that. Right?
Yeah.
Like I have a to-do list every day of all the things I'm trying to do, and then life inevitably, I don't want to say gets in the way, but life happens, right? Like things that you can't predict or control, which is basically all of life. Like it's very hard to predict things, very hard to control things. You can pretty much only control your effort or your attitude, and even those are very difficult to control at times. It gets you off track, right? And so then I constantly find myself like, okay, I got through 60% of the things I wanted to do today, and now a lot of this is reflected on my calendar. the 40% of the things I didn't get done now need to get rolled forward into the next. And so we're always dealing with this onrushing stream of entropy or problems or whatever it is. And how quickly we can adapt is basically the criteria for success. It's, what is the Charles Darwin quote, that it's not the strongest, the fastest, the tallest, or the most intelligent species that survives, but it's the one that's most adaptable to change. So it's literally the environment is changing all the time. And the more quickly you can get in sync with it and adapt to it in a way that furthers your own aims, well, the better off you are. And that requires a lot of things, right? That requires obviously intelligence, but not just intelligence, right? You need to be in touch with other people. And a lot of that has to do being in touch with people in the heart, right? Because a lot of people don't care. You could be the smartest guy alive, and people don't care what you have to think or whatever knowledge you may have to bring to the table if they don't like you, right? If you haven't first connected with them in the heart, they're not going to connect with you in the mind. So you need intelligence to deal with reality, but a lot of dealing with reality is dealing with other humans. So you better also have a way to connect to people. And admittedly, this one's difficult. Not for everyone. For me, in my life, it's actually been difficult because I'm a very cerebral guy. So I've had to learn over time to kind of get out of the head and get into the heart more. It's taken a lot of practice. It's taken a lot of experiences, therapy, all these things. It also, to be really adaptive to a constantly changing environment, takes a lot of humility, because especially, I would argue now in the digital age where things are changing faster than ever and they're also accelerating, like whatever you think, and you might be right even, but tomorrow you could be wrong. And so if you're holding on, what's that saying, strong opinions loosely held, something like that. It's like you have to be willing to give up your old models, your old opinions as things change. Yeah. Otherwise, you're going to be out of sync with reality. And there's no better way to not succeed at anything than being out of sync with reality. So, and
that also requires radical honesty to ourselves.
Yeah. Which is humility, right?
Yeah.
Radical, like you are, like no matter how smart you are, how competent you are, how wonderful you are, it's like you are still just one tiny little individual. You're one wave on the stream of humanity, like whatever knowledge you have, whatever accomplishments, whatever accolades, you are still just one little minuscule perspective on this whole giant complex whole. And that's the truth, right? That's absolutely true, unavoidably true, inescapably true. Right. And so with that truth, the proper orientation to all of that is be humble. Right.
And it's good the fact that you're saying we need to connect our mind to a heart, it means you're seeking from within. Because if we say, oh, I want to do this, I want to do that, but I'm just not able to, some would adopt the blaming mentality. Like if I were to be in this position, or if I were to be in that position, or if the fiat society isn't that, I would be this, and this. But sometimes the answer lies inside. We have to be radically honest with ourselves to say, is this true, or I'm bullshitting? Like, is this true, or I'm just making excuses to not act on what I think I want?
Yes.
And it boils down to asking yourself, how much do you want it? Because if you want it enough, you do it.
Yeah.
If you know better and then you want it enough, there's no other way. There's no other way. And if you don't want it and don't want to do it, then make peace with it. Like, don't not do something and feel guilty about it. Like, that's the worst.
For sure.
That's the worst.
Yeah. And patience too, I guess. Patience has got to be. I gave the example earlier of like, I thought I made this crystal clean judgment. I thought I was right for 3 days afterwards. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, wait a minute. It started to fall apart. And I was like, oh, I was wrong there. I was wrong.
Right.
And it culminated in this wrong judgment where it was me. I was in the wrong, but I thought I was projecting and thinking other people were in the wrong. And that that took time, right? Like there was no one in the world that could have talked me out of that. Well, I don't want to say that. I was very convinced in that moment that I was in the right, but then 3 days later, with a little bit of patience and reflection, it was the opposite.
Mm.
So, yeah, I think you have to, I don't know, I guess it grounds out in humility again.
Right.
And then we all, have our shortcomings, right? And we can all have our, and we're not always, I love this quote too. I think it applies to so many things. It's Heraclitus. No man steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river and it's not the same man. You're a different person day to day. Every day, every moment, we are changing. We are flow structures, right? We've got new food in us, new oxygen, new cells. Like we're constantly recycling. We're the product of our environments. We're the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with. It's like, well, who have you been spending time with lately?
Mm.
What culture have you been in lately? What weather conditions have you been in lately? What information have you been reading lately? All of these things are changing you all the time. So you're going to have off days. You're going to be in a situation that you're not fit to deal with. You're going to make mistakes. And so having that patience and maybe even grace with yourself and others. And like I say, and I'm not claiming at all to do this well at all. I'm actually probably at the lower quartile, but at least having the idea of
It's
trying
the
to work towards
awareness,
that
of course.
is helpful and useful. And again, this is where the exemplars come into play. It's like, it can sound very theoretical and abstract. It was like, well, you know what makes it concrete? The story, or a story of what Christ did in a particular situation, or a story of what how Socrates responded to his interlocutors specifically in words. And like, those are patterns that you can emulate basically.
Right. And speaking of the flow, like we're dynamic creatures and we flow through time.
Yes.
And then if we kind of borrow the school of Stoicism and how we want to get into flow state where things flow naturally and we're in tune with different sorts of energy. And I've seen a diagram where flow sits in the overlapping area of discipline and surrender. So what's your view on being disciplined and surrender? And that comes back to balancing duality. Like how can we as individuals, or how do you approach, where do you discipline yourself and where to surrender, and when to do these two things?
Well, that was a great question. It calls to mind, I mentioned this earlier, that you can only control your effort and your attitude. I heard that from a football coach at one point. Like that's what he was constantly reminding his team is, show up with good effort, show up with good attitude. Literally can't control anything else. Not if you win, not if you score the points, not if you move the ball forward, break a leg, whatever. Like all of it's out of your control other than effort and attitude. And that's very stoic, I think, in a way. Like it resonates deeply with stoic philosophy. And you want to be in stoicism, it's like being really serious about the things you can control, which really aren't much more than effort and attitude. Not much, like you can influence outcomes, but when we talk about control, like you're lucky if you can do those two things.
So losing the battle is you're doomed because you're getting in a battle that you're probably doomed to fail in a way.
Well, I mean, not necessarily doomed to fail, but like, again, approaching reality as it is. If we define control as like the power to manipulate at will, right? That my willpower just completely dominates whatever this thing is. What is that true of? Like, not much. It's true of, well, what level of effort am I going to put forth to accomplish the thing, whatever the goal is? Could be a shared goal, right? In the case of the football team, their point of common unity, the football community, is to win games, right? Go to the postseason and win the big game, whatever that is. And it could be things just personal to your life, right? Like you're trying to get in shape or learn something. And so the idea in Stoicism is like to really focus on the things you can control and completely let go of and accept the things that you cannot. which again is basically everything that's not your effort or your attitude. So you can be hyper focused on your discipline, your process, your training, your learning, your whatever the process is that is furthering you closer to that goal. You can be all about that, like so much fucking effort. And I'm showing up every day. I'm feeling constructive. Even on days I feel bad, I'm putting a smile on my face. Like that's peak performance. But the actual outcome, right? When you go to play the game or you go to whatever, compete in the business world, right? You've put all this effort and attitude into building this business. Now you got to take it to market, let's say. You can't control the outcome at all, right? You don't know what the other team's going to do. You don't know what your customers are going to do, right? Yeah. They could either completely, the other team could just run you over. The customers could totally reject your product. That's not for you to control. You actually have no control over that at all. Now you can influence it, but again, all of the influence, your ability to influence actually is going to be, I think, largely driven by the degree to which you accept the fact that you can't control it and focus on your effort and attitude, which paradoxically gives you more, not control, more influence over the outcome, let's say. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does, because there's so many things that are so true in life, and if you put them in words, they are gonna sound counterintuitive. Yeah. And in this scenario, one way I train myself to think around this is that if it's the same thing. I love the fact you say discipline on things that are within your control and just surrender on things that are not. Yeah. And I asked myself, if using the football team as example, if you know you're heading into a losing fight, would you have given your best? If you know you're losing, would you have tried your best? And if the answer is yes, then you're on the right path, because you're not after the outcome. You know you're gonna lose, but you're still gonna play your best because you love what you do. You have passion and you learn, and you improve. So that's a good indicator that you're on the right path. And if you're doing something that regardless of the outcome, you are gonna do your best, then why even ask the outcome? Then the outcome becomes irrelevant. Yeah, you let the, what do they say? Let the chips fall where they may. Is that the saying? Right. It's like you play your best game, you prepare as much as possible, right? Failure to prepare is preparing to fail. But at the end of the day, you can do all the preparation in the world. That's why we play the game. You still don't know the outcome. And so you have to accept these things. And yeah, it can be it is difficult, right? Because no one likes to lose. Everyone likes to win. Yet losing is a part of the learning process, right? You actually, I mean, you could say you learn from winning, but I don't know. You're not learning as much. You're learning a lot more when you're losing. Because you're getting information. It's like, oh, this doesn't work. I now need to change. It's information. I now need to put myself into a new formation to increase my chances of success next time. That is not coming from winning, right? Winning is like, okay, well, that worked. Let me try that again. Let me do that. Maybe you're tweaking, you're learning a little bit at the edges, right? Where maybe you were close to a failure, or you had something during the contest that was not so successful, and you're learning from those. But even those are like micro failures, right? So embracing the pain, embracing losing. I think, again, there's a paradox there. It's like, to the degree to which you do that gets you out of this duality of winning and losing, and gets you into the duality of winning or learning. Yeah, totally. And if you're always learning from every failure, then you're optimizing your probability for future success. But and patience come into. And patience, of course, right? Of course. And the willingness to endure that pain and like accept it as the only actual source of information to get better. Right? And that's proof of work. I remember I wrestled in middle school. And I was like kind of a chubby kid. So I was like 200-pound
how old was I? 12, 13 years old, I guess. And so they made me wrestle these older, bigger high school kids that were really big, strong kids. And I just literally got my ass handed to me for months and months and months of training. Like these guys just completely destroyed me for months.
Mhm.
But then when I went into the season and wrestled guys my own size, like I was actually competitive, and I won one of the county tournaments or whatever it was, and that's because I just sat through the pain for 3 months and absorbed all that information. And then, you go match up against someone that's a little more in your league, so to speak, and you can perform at a high level.
Exactly. It's
So,
the reference, where you
yes,
set the bar, right?
exactly.
And it's interesting because on the flip side of things, and sometimes when we think about what we're doing and then we ask ourselves, if I'm doomed to fail, would I still do it? I think that's a really good vibe check internally, accountability check, because then we ask ourselves, am I doing this for the right reason? Am I doing this to win, or am I doing this to grow?
Yeah, I would say if that's useful for you, good, but I would slightly challenge it and say you never know that you're going to fail. Just like you never know that you're going to win.
But you don't have to care. You don't care if I don't care if I win or lose.
No, maybe, yeah, sure. You don't have to care, but my point is you could never know. I mean, the only way you could know you're going to fail is if you go in and I'm going to throw the fight, right? Like I'm going into the boxing match, and as soon as he punches me once, I'm going to lay down on the floor. Like you could actually do that, I guess, and you would know you're going to lose. But I just say that to say that even if the odds are against you and you have a very slim chance of success and you're the underdog, don't go into the mentality that you're definitely going to lose. Like actually, that's going to contribute to the likelihood of you losing.
True.
And everyone loves a good underdog story. So,
Of course,
you
of
don't know.
course,
And that's why
of
they say in
course.
football, that's why they play the game. Sometimes a football team is a 50-point favorite over another one.
Yeah.
And sometimes they lose. Right.
And one thing that I will add on to that is that a mental trick I use sometimes regarding this when I'm not in a good position or in a more passive position, I told myself, just do your worst. Do your worst. And then I would just continue to do what I'm doing. But I will know that, I'm doing my worst. And, and then I would realize, if I'm using the mentality of doing my worst to approach this, which means if I'm doing my worst, I'm doomed to fail, but I'm still doing my best with that do your worst mentality. And then I'll be like, oh, wow, it's actually not as intimidating as I thought it would be. It's not as, I wouldn't be so attached of the outcome because I'm heading into this with the doing my worst mentality while I'm not actually doing my worst. And I think the combination of that gives me a lot of internal peace because I prioritize peace. This is something I prioritize. It's very, very hard. And sometimes it means I have to lose to get peace.
Maybe this goes back to the integration of the Jungian shadow, but those who wish for peace must prepare for war.
Death.
And death. The way of the warrior is the resolute acceptance of death. So yeah, you can prioritize peace, but if you're just trying to be this harmless, peace-loving person, very unlikely you're going to get peace, right? You actually need to be preparing. What's that saying that it's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war? You need to be actually prepared to deal with reality as it is, not as you wish it to be. And so, yeah.
That requires courage, that requires strength, and that actually to be able to get that peace, you actually need to work really, really hard because it takes a lot of effort to look effortless.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you're in a time of adversity or difficulty, where do you find courage? Where do you find strength and motivation?
One of the things that has been, and I feel bad saying this in a way, like when the adversity has turned up really high in my life, I go to meditation. And the reason I feel bad is because meditation has been so good for getting through hard times. But then as soon as the hard times pass, I fall out of practice of meditation. And I'm like, it actually improves everything in your life, everything, your sleep, your clarity of mind, your exercise, your creativity, my everything, my health, my everything feels better when you're just, and it takes some learning. You know, you could download one of the apps, and I just do a very simple, I guess they call it a Vipassana meditation, where you're just sort of to diffuse the mental chatter. I'm actually saying like breathing in 2, breathing out 3, breathing in 4, breathing out 5, and you go to 10, and then you repeat. And just by verbally saying that internally speaking that process, it prevents the monkey mind from chattering. And then you do that for, 20, 40. For me, the magic moment's usually after 20 to 30 minutes. That's when you can get into this point where you're just breathing and being, and you don't even have to recite the words anymore. Like you're literally in the no time, no space, eternal now. And you just sit there, and it feels like this spiritual cleansing or shower or something. And then when you come out of that meditation, typically flooded with creative thoughts, feeling good, feeling uplifted, motivated, all these things. That's been a very powerful source of surviving adversity for me. There's other things too, but I'll let you say what you're going to say.
When you experience eternity, like what does it mean? Does time stop or time stop to exist?
I don't think there's words that are adequate for it. I mean, it is something that I would encourage people to experience for themselves at some point. And anyone can do it, right? You can do these things through breath work or through meditation, psychedelics. You can also do it through certain, surfing, for instance, certain sports, time in nature, like long bouts of solitude. Like there's a way to get to this. Again, the mind is always chattering, right? It's this cacophony of language and thoughts and motivations, and there's a way to turn it off. And when you turn it off, you get more in touch with who you really are underneath your identity and your story that is yourself. Yourself basically is a story. You're the way you identify, what you consider yourself to be, how you conceive of yourself, the idea of yourself. And you are just in the present fully with all of your mindfulness and faculties fully engaged in that moment. And there's something really special about that. And other things that have helped me in adversity are prayer. You brought this up earlier. We were talking about like your past self and your future self, and a way to pray. I'm not saying the way to pray, but an alternative way to pray. Most people think it's, you get down on your knees and you start asking God for a bunch of things, right? Like, please do this, please do that, please look over them, please look over me here, please help me do this. An alternative method that I've come to appreciate, although I still do, I'll pray on my knees, hands clasped together. I've found that actually the traditional way of praying, asking for other people, feels better to me, right? Like, please be with so-and-so as they go through whatever family situation they're going through. And, everyone needs this. You could also ask other questions like, who, I learned this in my mastermind group, like, who in my life needs me to call them? Like, how many people are out there just struggling with loneliness all the time? And I think if you really pray on that you will have answers revealed to you, that there are people out there that really just use that phone call, right? They're going through something, some silent struggle. And, so just call them and be like, hey, how are you doing? Just checking on, So, but an alternative way to pray that I also really appreciate is, and it involves your future self, imagining yourself where you ultimately want to be. And from that place and from that person, your future self, expressing gratitude for how you got there. So
Right.
it's an imaginal act,
Yes.
not an imaginal, an act of imagination.
Right.
Imaginal has a different word, different meaning. That's not correct here. It's an act of imagination, putting yourself into this hypothetical future place that you wish to be in, being that person and being like, I am so grateful for all of the things that
Totally.
got me here. And then visual, like you're in your future self, but you're remembering the things that got you there, which are actually the path that your
Exactly.
present praying self is charting.
Yeah.
And that is a very fulfilling exercise. It helps, especially when you're in adversity. Again, you can chart your way out of the adversity very effectively. You're engaging the imagination a lot to figure that out.
Totally.
Um,
I resonate a lot with that because this is basically my approach. I don't pray often, and I'm very personally, I'm very shy of asking for things. I'm shy asking for things to the point I'm shy asking for things from God. So every few months, if I encounter some sort of hardship, I would eventually pray. And then I would always say the same thing. I would always say one thing, no matter whatever situation I'm in, which is thank you. Because I try to, because I have that relationship with time, and I try to, I'm not there, but this is awareness I have to think if I can operate with foresight. You know, we have hindsight, but
Yeah.
it doesn't help us.
That's
You
right.
know, I try to help
It
with
can
for the future.
if you apply it to foresight.
True.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if we think about basically the reason you said, think about right now, we're on the path of where we want to go. And then what I've realized over the years of, like, I love talking about and thinking about manifestation. And what I've realized is that the trick for manifestation to work is not about wanting it enough. It's about considering it done. So then you're approaching it from the
you're
point
acting
of
as if you've already accomplished it.
Right. You're approaching from a place of abundance
Yeah.
instead of a place of lacking.
Yeah.
And and what's the indicator of your approaching from the place of abundance is to say thank you, is to be grateful.
Yes.
That put you in that position of abundance.
Yes. No,
And
that's excellent. Yeah.
and you know how money flows to people who are not short of money,
Yes.
and love flows
Yes.
to people who are have no shortage of love. So if we're trying to manifest money, we have to live as we have all the abundance.
Yes.
If we want to manifest love, we need to first love ourselves, allow ourselves to be in the abundance of self-love, and have that overflowing energy to love others. So that's a place of abundance. So I try to, and if you want to manifest health, live as a healthy person. And that comes back to the doing. That comes back to, you cannot just sit on your couch and wish I'm fit, I'm healthy.
That's right.
You have to get off your ass and do the whole workout as a healthy person would do, because that's who you want to be. Just align yourself behaviorally and mental framework wise. There's no excuse. If we want it enough, just do it. There's
just do it.
No
take
bullshit.
action. But yeah, I mean, you're speaking to, again, this gets back to role models and exemplars in a way that you're imagining yourself like, I want to be that person, right? And then you're using that this construction of the imagination as the standard by which you measure all of your current actions, right? Is this taking me closer to that or taking me further away from that? And you are also basically imitating this hypothetical future self, right? You see, okay, this guy that's rich and has a loving family and is well regarded in his field, whatever it may be, acting like that, imitating that imagined individual actually brings you closer to becoming that individual. So, that's very useful, but then it also reinforces the importance of this idea we're talking about earlier with Christ and Socrates. Like, these guys could just be made up and imagined. They could have never lived at all.
Yeah.
But they're parts of the collective imagination that are very useful. It's like, just use them as standards against which to measure yourself.
I try to have a relationship with eternity. And what happens is that I used to be a person who's never able to be present. I was always, what I'm doing next. I'm in a rush. So as a kid, I would finish my homework in a rush, but with care, so that I can go do something else, right? There's always this next thing, and I'm excited for the next thing. And I have to really train myself to get out of that And eternity to me, I try to imagine myself at any given moment. It's an exercise that I do often wherever I am.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine where I am. I'm here from the beginning of time, and then I'll be here until the end of time.
Mm.
So this in this way, time actually exists, and I'm just here in all of it.
Mm.
Then what it does, it's like it gave me this awareness of I have arrived.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I'm supposed to be doing, or this is where I'm supposed to be from. If I'm here from the beginning of time to the end of time, there's nowhere else to go.
Mm-hmm.
There's no next thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have to feel the urge that I have to go on to the next thing.
Mm.
So you live in arrival, but in reality, you're constantly doing things. So all of the arrival becomes departure into the future now. So I try to kind of feed myself with all of these paradoxical idea, but it always return to the same thing, which it teach me to be present. Because the now is all there is.
Yes, yeah. Which is like the essence of mindfulness, right? Doing
Yeah.
whatever you're doing, whether you're pouring the tea or you're writing a, masterpiece symphony, you're doing it with your whole being, right? You're not partly here and partly thinking about that and partly thinking about this, right? You're completely, I was going to use the word integrated, but that's not right. It's you're completely pouring the whole of your being into
You're in the
that
flow.
Yeah, you're in flow.
You're in the flow.
Ideally you're in a flow state, right? Which is that point of action, right? Where you're not, the conception has served the point of action, but you're not in the action and thinking about something else, because then the conception is a distraction from the action.
Yeah.
Like you're totally in the moment of action itself.
And we were talking about time and navigating through adversity. You recently went to Burning Man,
Yes, I did.
right? Was this your first time?
First time.
How was it?
It was amazing. It's one of those experiences, I think, that you can make whatever you want out of it in a way. Like there's all kinds of different people, all kinds of different things to do. There's a lot of really cutting edge talks. Like I mentioned Robert Grant earlier. I saw him speak. He had been on the podcast a few weeks before, so we had a dynamite conversation. But the speech he gave at Burning Man was so cool. He was connecting mathematics and music, but then he also connected mathematical constants being like the verbs of language, and the way he connected all of these domains. It was so unbelievably fascinating. I don't know. Everyone that hears him talk is pretty blown away, but it was really good. And then there's a very serious spirit of generosity at Burning Man. I don't know the history of it, but it started in 1986, which is the year I was born. So it's 38 years old. And however they've cultivated this culture of like people don't transact in money on the playa other than ice. You can only use money to buy ice, which I guess is just a supply and demand thing, right? You're in the middle of the desert. Someone's got to, buy ice. And actually water too. Sometimes like if you need more water for your RV, you can like wave these trucks down and get more water. So yeah, water and ice.
Did they take Bitcoin?
I actually, I don't know. It was like prepaid. So yeah, I'm not sure about that, but, so people don't commercially transact, but everyone's giving something away all the time, right? Like as you bike down the playa through the camps, people have megaphones like, oh, come get free hamburgers or free fried rice or free massage, like all these different things. So that was really cool. We're also very fortunate. I had a really good friend that took us, and so she brought us into her camp. The camp was just amazing people, very intelligent. Like I was having these mind-blowing conversations all the time. Very accomplished people. There was actually a wedding ceremony there. It was like just a lot of love. And it felt like people very empathic, very connected, very much flow state, actually. You would say like a lot of people are just in this flow state and very service oriented, like servant heart. Everyone kind of pitches in and helps take care of the camp. And it was an overwhelmingly good experience. And it felt like a bit of a glimpse into the future of what humanity maybe it's like kind of one of these imagined future humanities in a way, like something we could work towards. Now, look, I'm not saying it's perfect. Like it's still Burning Man, it's the world. There were like people that stole bikes and people, people are doing drugs and some people die and there's craziness about. Don't get me wrong, but my personal experience in my camp was overwhelmingly unbelievable. Like literally not one negative interaction, all positive, good interactions with the people inside my camp. We had a couple of negative interactions with. We were taking photos by one of the art pieces one day, and this guy just literally parks his bike. There's no one around for 100 yards. This guy bikes across a playa and parks his bike right in front of the camera, right in front of the art piece. And the girls are like, sir, would you mind moving your bike? We're like in the middle of a photo shoot, and there's no one around. And he's like, yes, I mind. Yes, I mind. Just being a total dipshit. And like, then he proceeds to, I like kind of looked at him and we started to have a thing, but then I was like, I'm not going to fight someone at Burning Man. Like, so I just like, whatever. And the girl's like, just leave him alone. I was like, all right, that's fine. And then he walks like 200 yards away. Like he literally came and parked his bike in the middle to block their camera and then just walked away 200 yards. I was like, this guy is just being so purposefully inconsiderate. But anyways, there was like one of two negative interactions we had the whole time we were there, and they were always with strangers.
Is there anything that surprised you, or what was your biggest takeaway?
Oh my God, the temple was so powerful. Actually, so it's Black Rock City is built like a clock, essentially. The Burning Man's in the middle, right? So the very central axis of the clock, and then the temple would be at midnight, and then the camps are like between, I guess, 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock. Right, and then the playa is up here, is like empty playa, and so the art carts and things will go out into the playa and play music and all that, and they'll come back. But all the camps are circular, and so that's how you navigate too. Is that between the man and the temple is midnight basically, and then so you'd be 8 o'clock, and then the roads are consensual A, B, C, D, E. So like you'd be 8 and F, and so when you're biking on the playa, you have to triangulate yourself. Basically, it's like, oh, there's the man, there's temple, that's midnight line. I'm 8 o'clock, and you go towards that, and then on the outskirts of the camps, there's all these art pieces that are fixed, so you could orient yourself. Like we were near the 3 big planets as you went back in, so we could find the 3 big planets and go in, but you can't see them from a distance, especially if this dust is kicked up. And so yeah, it was just such. You asked what was powerful, but the temple. So the man's in the middle, the temple's up top. The temple is where people, as I understand it, they go to they were posting photos of deceased loved ones or writing names of people lost, or also things that people are just looking to let go. Like one of my friends was like letting go of a past relationship, so she was going through that stuff, putting photos of them at the temple to let it burn. It's after they burn the man on Saturday and they burn the temple on Sunday. And so when we were at the temple, the feeling of just how much emotional or spiritual energy was there, like some people are crying their eyes out, a woman like lost her baby and she's like, there's so much emotional pain. Other people are like, they're loving, like a loving couple's like embracing about, you don't know their story, you don't know what's going on, but there's just so much there. And like just to go through the temple is a very solemn kind of vibe, but very like electric, you could feel it a lot. And yeah, it was really, really powerful.
Returning to the heart.
Yes. And then they burn it all, the last day you watch it burn, and that's like the release for people. It's people put the photos or the names and just let it burn. And yeah, it was a very powerful experience. And it's a mess, there's playa dust, and you got to be very well prepared, and you got to have goggles and mask and lights and on your bike and all this stuff so you don't run into people, and there's a lot of preparation that goes into it. But it's so cool. It's so cool.
Boils down to worth it.
What's that?
It boils down to, is it worth it? Because I haven't been, and I've
well again it's like I hesitate to be prescriptive about these things, but
True.
It's like,
but for you it was worth it.
For me,
was it?
I love art. I'm the kind of guy that'll just go walk through an art museum for hours and like, I can find an art piece that I like and I start reading about the history of it. And I think it's such a cool way to explore humanity in a way, right? It's like through art, basically. So this place is a living art piece. Everything, like we sit in this room right now, like we have all these right angles, and like this is basically every room we're in is some version of this.
Mhm.
When you go there, it's like there is none of that. I mean, your RV, I guess, would be the closest thing to a normal room. Everything else is like this artistic, exotic camp art piece thing, and the art carts are all moving pieces of mechanical art, and it was just so immersive, and I found that to be really cool. And for me, like I really enjoy. I'm a big like deep house, organic, ethnic deep house music fan, and one of the most enjoyable aspects of human freedom for me is to just go and let go and be at a place like that and to just be vibing with the crowd and dancing, like listening to really good music. Typically, it has like a really deep message, like a poetic message, and I just fucking loved it. It was so good. And you know what else was so cool? It's very hard to coordinate there. Like I knew several people and groups of people that were there, but you don't take your phone out really. Like we've got Wi-Fi at the camp, but you don't have service all over the playa, and everyone's got their own agenda, their own whatever. So it's like it's difficult to coordinate with people to meet up. Just basically serendipitously, every person that I wanted to see, we just ran into them out on the playa. And there's 60,000, 70,000 people. Like it's a city,
That's a lot.
Yeah,
People.
it's almost the size of downtown San Francisco. It's a city. But every person that in my heart was like, I hope I really get to see, these, like, it was like 5, 6 people. But, you're texting with them. They're like, oh, yeah, I'm going to be here. Or I'm going to be there. See me at this concert. But it's like, even when you go to the same concert as them, well, there's 20,000 people there. It's like, how are you going to find them? And so, anyways, just happened to run into all of them. Synchronicity, yeah.
Serendipity.
And the best piece of advice I heard from someone there was the best thing you can do on the playa is follow the adventure. Like, it's not so much a place that is accommodating to super rigid plans. Like, you just got to learn to go with the flow and follow the adventure. And sure enough, when we did that, we had an amazing time.
Wow, that's a good note to end this conversation. Just follow along the adventure. And thank you so much, Robert. This is a blast and great to have this opportunity to dive into so many great topics and hear your side of the story.
Thank you.
And in this, I think in a way, sooner or later, we as Bitcoiners, we start to think that, you know what, the life with Bitcoin is really worth living.
Yeah.
And even we, in a way, exclude the financial aspect and the journey that we're on to explore ourselves, spending time and finding meaning with our loved ones and in the time and space that we talked about so much through the higher self that knows better, through our consciousness, through our interaction, intertwining all these concepts and constructs and different topics. It's so fascinating, and it's a journey that's worth living. Gives us so much meaning and joy and purpose to live for another day. And while we improve ourselves, improve our lives for our loved ones through Bitcoin, making it a thing to move even humanity further.
Yeah, no, it's a real rabbit hole, but I think once you've done the work, you'll come to see it as a very beautiful thing, and perhaps even like an instantiation of those gold and silver rules that we mentioned earlier, right? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you, and don't do unto others as you would not have them do unto you. Bitcoin is one of those things, right? It's like we really do. I mean, if you're a morally righteous person by my standard, you would want people to have life, liberty, and property, and to respect the life, liberty, and property of others. Like that, like I can't conceive of any argument against that whatsoever, period. And people always want to get into these edge cases like, well, what about if someone does this? And then it's like, okay, uninitiated force is basically never justified. Now, if someone initiates force against you, then obviously you need to defend yourself or whatever it may be. But the heart of libertarian philosophy and the essence of this triad of life, liberty, and property is just don't hurt anyone and don't steal from anyone, right? Unless they do it to you first, and not steal, but to defend yourself is okay. And so Bitcoin, let's start with the silver rule, I guess. Don't do unto others as you would not have them do unto you. Again, by being this container for purchasing power that's really hard to violate, it incentivizes people to adopt that silver rule. It's like they just stop stealing from one another because it's less possible, basically, or less profitable more generally. And on the golden rule, then you've taken coercion largely out of the equation through incentives. So then you're left with consent, basically, is the other mode of human interaction. And that's where you get the golden rule, right? It's like, oh, just trade with people and talk to people and form long-term trading relationships and, do what makes us human, really. I mean, the best side of human. I guess there's other dark things that make us human, but it brings out the best in us, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And it's easy to think, oh, yeah, sure. What? This guy's been drinking a lot of that orange Kool-Aid and he sounds like he joined a cult because this all sounds idealistic and far-fetched and not possible. But I would challenge you to do the work for yourself and see what you find out. Like, the one thing about the Bitcoin rabbit hole that seems to be universally true is that it is a one-directional, irreversible journey. People go in, no one comes out. There's no ex-Bitcoiners. I literally know zero, unless you're going to talk about someone that got into Bitcoin and became a shitcoiner. But even those guys tend to come back around to Bitcoin at some point. So, yeah, it's it has a lot of philosophical, intellectual, financial gravity, and I would encourage people to just give it a look.
Wow, well said. And it's been a very dense conversation. We've talked about the nature of time. We've talked about balancing duality. Talked about searching in search and align the higher self. And yeah, well said. Embrace adversity, embrace challenge, return to our heart, and follow our dreams. Let's end the conversation on that note. Thank you again, Robert, for your great insight, for sharing your experience and thoughts so openly with us. And yeah, I hope that we could do this again at some point. It's been super fun. Thank you so much.
I'd love that. Thank you so much. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, click here to find more just like it, and here to find our most recent episode. Also, make sure to like this video to help shine light on the corruption of money. And be sure to subscribe to this channel to stay connected.